Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the School Manager Part 10. In this week's exclusive training, I'm going to show you how to automatically enroll students in a class just by adding their names. It's going to be great. We're also going to show you how to, again, automatically schedule lessons based on tons of factors, including the from date and to date, as well as updating those lessons if the schedule changes. So it's going to be a lot. We're going to show you how to update this. We've got a ton of new features waiting to come. I can't wait to share it with you. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much. I've got so much to cover this week. This week, we're diving deep into the School Manager. Part 10 is where we are at. We are going to show you how to develop these classes. In fact, I'm going to show you that, and I got a great little application flow chart to show you that we're going to set up, and also we're going to go over a lot more. So we'll be able to add students just as with this sample. Those students are automatically going to be saved with the course. So when you go out of a specific class and come back in, those enrolled students are automatically saved. I'm also going to show you how we can automatically update and add scheduled lessons on a simple click. So when we add those lessons based on both the from and the to date, and based on the day selected, all we need to do is just update, and it's going to automatically calculate a list of scheduled classes and lessons on those dates. So it's going to be a really great training. We've got so much to cover. This is the sample one. I'm going to be creating this from scratch just as I do each and every week, every line of code, every formula, conditional formatting. I'm going to show with you. So we're going to get this, save this. I'm going to close this, and we're going to go right where we left off last week. And that's going to be right here inside part 10. This is part 10 right here. Yeah, and I created a brand new, just as you saw, a brand new application flowchart. We're going to start off with that. Before I do, I want to make sure that you do get these trainings each and every week because I create them for you exclusively every Tuesday. We're going to do a live chat every Tuesday too, so I hope you'll join us for that. If you like these trainings, I'll ask just a few things. Please do subscribe and click that notification icon bell. That'll ensure that you get these trainings to you each and every week. I create these downloads for you, free to download. All you need to do is just click the links in the description below, either with your email or with Facebook Messenger. We're going to get that sent over to you. Feel free to comment. I respond to each and every single comment. I create these absolutely free for you, but if you want to pick up a list, an entire workbook full of them. In fact, I've got 175 applications complete with a library. It's single click library, just single click to open up the application, or the corresponding training video here on YouTube. I've compiled all that into a single library. That's just $66, only 37 cents, and that would really help us out. So 37 cents per workbook is a great deal. All right, let's get started. We've got so much to cover this week. I can't waste a lot of time. Let's focus on the enrolled student. So basically, when I change a student here, I want to make sure that that student gets enrolled. Before I do that, let's just go over a quick review. I've created a little bit of an application flow chart just so you can get a kind of a bird's eye overview of how this application works. And I've included that, and I've just done this in Excel. Inside here, just a sheet. I mean, not in keeping this, but I'm going to keep it for a while just to show you. So basically, we've got an admin. The admin controls access to all of the students, the forms, the teachers, right? So these are the individual UI forms, teachers, and form lists. So this is everything the users see here, whether it's a student or form list, right? We have here inside our students, and of course the teachers which we created, and now we're focused on the classes. So these are all the forms where you can input, edit, update, delete those classes. We're going to have an email notification, and we're going to have an income expense form. So we're going to be working on that in the coming weeks. Our databases are here in blue. This is what stores all of our data information. This is what keeps it. This is hidden from the end user. They won't see it. So we're not going to spend a lot of time formatting the databases, but this is what keeps everything secure. And it is these databases that hold all of the data in the application other than a few fields on the admin screen. Now, the best way to do it, the scheduling component of it, everything's going to build into that scheduling component. You'll see, as you see here, there's a lot of things that feed into that scheduling, whether it's the students, the teachers, of course, the classes and the lessons. Now, the lessons are simply a subset of the classes. So when I create a class, just as we're doing today, create a class, and then that class is going to be, let's say, twice a week for 2 months. What I want to do is when I automatically create, save, or update that, I want those lessons to reflect those classes. So for example, if I've got a class that's scheduled for twice a week for 4 weeks, I want it to create 8 individual lessons based on the time, the teacher, the room, and everything else. It is then those lessons that will appear on-site in the schedule there. And it is those lessons that we can then modify the times. We can change the teacher out. We can add notes. We can assign assignments to those specific lessons. So again, the class is basically above that, a higher subset. A lesson is a subset of that class where we create lessons automatically based on the class template. And then of course we have exams, quizzes, tests, or assignments that can get assigned to specific lessons as well. Email notification database, that of course is going to be able to send out alerts and emails based on a variety of information and data that we store inside our databases and other databases. And then income and expense, that's going to become, all that's going to be built inside the report dashboard. That dashboard, we're going to take all that information, whether we want to show student list, teacher list, classes, lessons, report cards, assignments, grades, exams, whatever, expense reports, profit and loss, that's going to all be built into a single sheet, single click dashboard. Now I've done a lot of that, even much more in our mentorship program, but I'm going to show you a basic set of it here. And then if you want to learn more, you can join our mentorship. Okay, so that's kind of it. So I'm going to keep that. That's an overview. This gives you a kind of great look of what we're building and how far we are and what we still have to build. So that really helps us. So I do urge you to build your own when you're designing your new software. If you like these flow charts and you want to learn more about them, again, our mentorship goes into a lot of detail on those. All right, so let's get back into the classes because that's what we're focusing on this week, is classes. So really what I want to do is I want to basically, when I have a selected course or class here, I want to make sure that those students get enrolled automatically in that, assuming that the class has been saved. We want to make sure that we do save a class. We can't enroll students in a class that doesn't exist, so we want to urge the user to save a class. And now also a bit of a differentiation in our students. When we make an update to a student, that gets saved automatically to the database. Any change we make gets saved automatically. The same thing with the teachers. Any change that we make is going to get saved. However, in classes, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to add an update button here. So when I load that, right, I want to add an update button. And the reason is this. When I make a change to the term, when I make a change to the from date or to date specifically, or I change perhaps the start time or duration, I want those to be reflected in our lessons. Now we're going to be building out the lessons database today. When I change the frequency of a day, right, our lessons are reflected. Now it's not all lessons. It is going to be only lessons in the future, right? So we don't want this, if we're halfway, let's say we're halfway through the school year and we decide that we're not going to have Fridays anymore. Only our class is only going to be scheduled, let's say, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We need that change to be reflected in all the future classes in the schedule. We need to show that up. So to make sure that we don't affect it, I want to make sure that those changes are not being affected immediately, right? Not immediately, but only when the user commits to those changes, when they actually click an update button. So changes in this, we're not going to have them. We're going to actually force the user to click update. So let's do that now. Let's add that button in, that update button, just so we can ensure that we want them to commit to those changes using the update. So it's a little bit of a differentiation, but that's okay. That's why we're here, to explain why sometimes you want changes automatically saved and why sometimes we really want an update button. So in this case, we're going to use an update button. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply duplicate this button using Control D. That's going to keep it inside the same group. Control C, Control V will put it outside the group. So then in this case, I'm just going to call this update. Now I do have a specific icon for it, which we're going to use. The button's a little bit big. We can cut that in half, probably to, let's say, 0.7 here. Or 0.8, I think is better. I'm going to drop this down. We'll be using it a little bit. And then I got an icon. Which icon I'm using? Well, I guess we used a simple one for, let's say, new classes. We use this save class. I'm just going to use this icon right here. So I'm going to copy this. This time I'm going to paste it outside. Control V, because I want it to appear outside the group. I'm going to load a class, which is going to automatically load this toolbar. And now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this icon here, and I'm going to place it right in here, right where it goes. All right, good. So we've got that there. So now what I want to do is I want to select this group, this specific group, but I want to add an icon to it, right? This icon is not part of the group, but I need to add it to that. So the best way to do that is you're going to copy this group name, Control C. Then I'm going to click Ungroup. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Control, and I'm going to click on this specific icon here. Then I'm going to click Regroup, and I'm going to paste that group name back in. There we go. Now it's pasted back in. So now everything's up to date. It's not the prettiest. We can align these a little bit better here so we can have the concise, try to have the spacing consistent if we can do that. And then, all right, good. So we've got it there, and we know, making sure that that appears. Notice it's gone from there, but we want it to appear automatic always. So when we regroup, we need to make sure that we're ensuring that we're always going to be setting it to move but don't size. In this case, move but don't size, because regardless of the tab we select, we want to make sure that that new class and update button are always appearing there. Now we can use the same macro, although we're going to have to modify that. Last week we focused on saving, but this time we're going to use that same macro. We're just going to make a few modifications. So we can assign that just to make sure that it's assigned. I'm going to, again, right click, assign that macro. We're going to look for something called classes save. That's the one I want to focus on. That's the one I want to assign, class save. It is that macro that we're going to go into and modify that, because I want to make sure that we're determining whether it is a new. Now it is the same macro that we're using. We're going to save whether it is new and existing, and that differentiator that's going to tell us whether it is a new or existing is going to be this class row right here, class database row right here. If this is blank, and why would it be blank? It'll be blank if this class ID is empty. If it is, then for certainly we're going to make sure that it's new. So when we click new class, notice that the class ID gets cleared out, class rows automatically. So B7 is going to tell us whether it is a new class or an existing class. And then also we're going to add a macro to cancel new. So let's do that right now. Let's get into that, and we'll go into the developers, and then we're going to go inside that's Visual Basic and go into the classes module. That's the one we're going to be focusing on here. I'll save the work that we've done so far, and we're going to go into save, but I want to make a few differentiations. First of all, I need to make sure of a few things. Last week we ran into a little bit of trouble because we were trying to save a class that didn't have a from and to date. So we're going to make that a requirement. I want to make sure that classes have a from and to date, right? We can't save a class without those 2 dates. I think that's really, really important, along with the class name. A teacher we could probably leave out. It's not that critical. Subject and term, it's not necessarily if we're not using terms, but the from and to dates certainly are important. So we want to make sure that those. And I also want to make sure that once the from and to date are added, I want to make sure that that to date is after that from date. So we need to check both of those things right now within the macro, and that's going to be regardless of whether it is a new class or an existing class. So here we check for duplicate, here we're checking for empty. So let's add another caveat here, and we're going to make sure that both, if either J9 or L9 is empty, then we need to let the user know to make sure to put in those. So we can write that up right here. If .range J9 equals empty, and then all we need to do is simply need to copy that and just change it to L9, or L9 equals empty, then we need to do something, let the user know, and this is going to be changed to L9. So in those cases, we need to let the user know. And in this case, we'll do a little message box, and then we'll say, please make sure to have a from date, capital Z, and to date fields before saving. Okay, just say, we'll say before saving the class. These fields cannot be left blank. And the reason why it's important is we can't generate lessons unless we have both a from and a to date. So that's really good. Be left blank. Okay, good. Exit sub. We can't do anything unless we have those. So again, I want to make another check, assuming that they do have both those. I want to make sure that L9 is actually greater than. Okay, so let's just write this in here. We can copy this. I'm going to copy this here and just make some updates here. So in this case, if J9, we can say L9 is less than J9. So we'll switch those around a little bit. L9 is less, change this to less than J9. Then what are we going to do? We need to let the user know, hey, you cannot have a from date. So we can just clear this out and say, please make sure that, let's say, that the to date is after the from date. Okay, that's going to ensure that we get the right dates and that they're correct. Okay, not just are they blank or not, but make sure they're actually after and subsequent, because that's going to create an issue if our from date is less than our to date. Okay, we'll bring that down here. I want that actually second, not first. So we'll put that second. And okay, so we've got that. Let's put a little bit of notes on here. I'm going to put both from and to dates required. And then I also want to put if from date here is before, right? Okay, if to date is before from date. Okay, can't have that. All right, so now that we got our required field, so we can move on. So again, I want to determine now, we've got our class row, but our class row is going to be based on the first available row, but only if it's new, So how do we know if it's new? B7 is empty. If dot range B7 dot value equals empty, then it's a new row, right? So then it's new, else it's existing. Put existing class, and we'll do something else there. So if it's a new class, I want to do a few things, right? So I want to set here, I want to set the class ID. I want to do all of this if it's new. So I'm going to drag that up here. That's if it's new. Let's make that look pretty. And clear out the extra space. What if it's existing? If existing, we're going to set the class row. Where's that class row? It's going to be located right here in B7. So again, class row equals B7. Okay, so now we've got the class row. So now we've set the class row regardless. Here, column A of the class database only gets that ID because it's new. It's already there. We don't need to add it in. It's already inside there as well. Okay, so we're good to go. So we've got that. We've just made that small change. So now we can use this same macro for both updates and new classes. But here's another challenge, right? If I'm updating the classes, what if they're making an update? What if they've updated the from date? Let's say we've got a previously saved. Let's say we've generated all these lessons, right? There are all these lessons here that were generated. And let's say they decided they're going to change the to date. Let's say they wanted a month earlier or a month later. I need to go ahead and update all those lessons in the future to make sure that they're actually accurate based on the new information. Or what if they change the days, right? So we need to make sure. So I need to know, have they made a change to anything that affects those lessons? What would affect the lessons? It would be the from date, the to date, any of the days here, the location, we're going to save that, the start time, the duration, all of those things affect the lessons, right? Because I want all that information saved with the lesson, because that lesson information is what's going to appear on our schedules, whether it's our day view, week view, or month view schedules. That's the lesson information. So that's really important. So I need to differentiate. So I need to regenerate those lessons based on those changes. But what if they change? Also the teacher too. The teacher is going to come along with that. So, but what if they just change the class name, or what if they change the year level, right? I want to differentiate between a few different types of changes. If they change just the notes, we don't need to regenerate those lessons. But if they change the class type, we don't also. But so some of the things are going to affect those. So I need to differentiate between two different types of changes. So what I'm going to do is have a little space so that we know that those changes have been made. So the best way to do that is just use the cell that's going to like a true or false or Boolean to let us know if there's been scheduled changes. So let's go ahead and I'm going to use down here, let's say 15 for that. And I'm just going to call it scheduled change. And so when a user makes a scheduled change on an existing, right, in the new one, new classes won't matter because we're going to generate those. We're really focused on new. Schedule, it's called change. In that case, I need to put a true or false here. We'll put false for now, but I want it to go to true. So if this is true, then I need to run a new macro that's going to regenerate those lessons or update those lessons based on whatever changes. So let's put that side in the code. If B15 equals true, then what we need to do is run a macro to update those lessons. So that's what we're going to do right here, and I want to know that we're going to do that. And of course, that's only for existing. Remember, new classes, we're going to do it automatically. New classes, I'm going to run a macro right here, because this is for new. Going to call this class, and then we'll write that macro, and we're going to call it create lessons. So that's going to actually create them all or generate them all. And this one, we're going to call it classes and update lessons. So class update lessons, but only if B15 is true. I don't want to do it every single time we save it. I don't want to regenerate, but only if B15 is true. So how do we do that? Well, that's just simply checking to see it. So if .range B15 .value equals true, then run the macro. And we got to write these macros. It's going to create, I'm not going to write them, but I'm just going to create something down here. Let's just put in sub, and then I'll paste that in there just so it's there. And I'm going to do the same thing for here, just so we have an empty macro so it won't create it. So we've got update lessons and create lessons. So again, down here, sub, and then paste that in there. Okay, so now it won't create a bug when we run that. Okay, so saving our work. So we understand that if the user makes a change to some of these fields, then we're going to change B15 to true. So let's color these down here, maybe all the way down to 17. I'll give that color, or maybe all of them. Let's go all of them, because I think we're going to be using most of them. I'm going to be adding some things in here that's going to help us understand. So what else do we need? I also want to know there's a difference though. Okay, so let's say they change the start time, or let's say they change the duration, but they don't change any of the days, and they don't change the from date and to date. Well, that's all I need to do is update the existing lessons. I just need to update the start time, or I need to update the duration, or maybe the teacher, right? But what if they change the day? So there's different kinds of changes. If they change that from date, or they change that to date, or they change the day of the week, I need to regenerate or double check all those lessons, right? Because some may not, if we need to remove Tuesdays or something from the future, so it's a different kind of change. So let's do this. Let's call this date or day change. I want to differentiate between that two. That did to be a true or false. All right, and I also am going to want to know the next lesson ID. We're going to put IDs on these lessons, next lesson ID, just like we did, and we'll create a database for that. And also, I want the teacher ID. Let's put the teacher ID in here because I want to save the teacher name and the teacher ID. So what is that teacher ID? Well, our teacher is located right here. So how do we get the teacher ID? So we just use a index for that. So I'm going to use equals if error in case there's nothing. Going to index, in this case, the teacher ID, which is here. And I'm going to use a match. I'm going to match it based on the teacher name. So I'm looking it up here. And we're going to be based on the teacher name. So we'll look up teacher. In this case, full name, sorted, doesn't necessarily matter. And then 0, and then 1. That's the column. If there's an error, we'll just use empty. Okay, so that's going to, now we've got our teacher ID right here. This is our teacher ID because I'm going to save that. I want to save that also in there, saving that inside the database too because we're going to save that. Okay, good. So I also want to know the next, I'm going to have enrolled. We're going to have enrolled. I want to know who's been enrolled. So we're going to have students that get enrolled. So I'm going to add that here inside the 10. I'm going to call this enrolled refresh. Enrolled. Sorry, my email. I've got to turn off the sound on that. Enrolled. And then we'll call it refresh. That might help us. And then also I want to know the enrolled ID. So here, let's call it next enrolled. So our enrolled students are going to have their own IDs, enrolled IDs. So I want an ID to track who's been enrolled in the class. So we're gonna write that too. We've got a lot of work to cover this week. All right, so let's write that up so we can set that change event so that when those are changed, not on new classes. So there's two caveats, not on new and not when we're loading. So we need to make sure that when class is the loading, what's the loading? When we make that change here, that kind of change, when we make that change, I want to make sure that's not the kind of change that's going to go to true. So we want to make sure that class load also goes to true and false. Let me double check that inside the class load. We want to make sure that B4 goes to true and then back to false. So we're going to look for that macro right down here. That's the one we wrote last week here, class load B4. Let's set that B4 to true. That's what we want, set it. And we want to make sure it goes to false before we finish, which it does. Good. So now we know that that's right. So we can go inside the classes and we can write up, this is going to be based on the change event, a worksheet change event. So we're going to write that in right now. So on, let's write up some notes so we know what we're focused on. On change of schedule, and that would include the date, time, room, duration, days, again, but not on load or for new classes. So now we can kind of get an idea of what it's going to be affecting there. Okay, so if not, we're going to focus on a specific range. Now let's take a look. What is that specific range? Well, again, we want to make sure that all of these items that we're going to be focused on, any changes, that's the one we want to affect. So let's write in that range and then double check it now. It's going to include here, bring this down here so we can see it, and then I'll bring this up here. All right, so we know it's going to be, let's say, we want to focus on the teacher, so it's going to be J7, because I want to put that teacher on the lesson. So also within the lessons, I want that teacher. Why is that important? Because let's say we use a substitute teacher. The teacher may not be the same for every single lesson. If the teacher's sick, we want to track when a teacher shows up or doesn't. So we do want that teacher J7. So it's things we want to track per lesson and not necessarily per class. The subject wouldn't necessarily change, so I don't think that's too important. But we also want the from date located on J9 and also and the from date and the to date. So would that be J9 and also L9? Those are the ones we want. And also I want to make sure that J11 here, J11 located the room. That's going to be important in case there's a room change, right? Comma J11. Okay, and also what else do we have? We have I want to know if there's a time change or a duration change on H13 or J13. So comma H13, good, I'm looking at that, J13. And then also, let's see, is there anything else? Of course there is. We want to make sure if there's any day changes. That would be all the way from M11 all the way to M17. So any change within then, we also need to know too. So M, in this case, 11, all the way through M17. So those are the changes. Is nothing. And of course, there's two conditions. We need to make sure that it's not new. How do we know if it's new? Well, we know new is B7 is not empty, right? And range B7 dot value does not equal empty. And also we want to make sure it's not on load. So and range B4 dot value equals false, right? We have to make sure it's false. Can't be true. Then we can focus on what we want to do. Okay, so now any of those change event. So now what if, now I want to even check for, what if they decide to double click in here and they click out? Well, that's considered a change event, but there's no change to the database, right? So what I want to know is if it's exactly the same as what's in the database. How do we know what's in the database? Well, this is in J7. If we look in our class's database and we look up on here in J7, I know the row already. How do I know the row? Well, the row is located right here in B7, right? So if we look in B7 and we can determine the column, we look in the row 4 here, we can see that that type of change, there's no change. It's the same here in row 4. So let's do that. Let's say if the user makes a change, but the change is the same as in the database, like as if they double click on the center, then don't do anything. Let's do that. Let's write that up. So that way there's nothing going to be done if they double click in a cell and go out of it. There's not really a change to the database. So that's just a way to save some time and save in case they make a change. It's a good option. If you're making changes, check to see if there's actually a change to the database. You can speed up your code a lot because not every change is an actual change. So we can do that if the target dot value equals, and then how do we know? We're going to focus on the classes database dot cells, and then the row. Where's the row? The row is located already in B7. So range B7 is the row. We know it's a row because it's an existing. What about the column? How do we find the column? Well, the column is going to be based on this. J7, all I need to do is look up J7 in row 1, and I know that that's column 3. So we can extract the column using that, right? Using that formula. So we can use the find for that. So let's do that. Let's put that in right now. So it's going to be classes database dot, and then in this case, we're going to look at range. We're going to look in row 1 through 1, the entire row, and I'm going to look for something. I'm going to use find. And what am I going to find? I want to find the target address. But I don't want the address with the dollar signs. I want the address removed, right? I don't want the absolute. So how do I do that? I use replace on that. I'm going to be replacing what? The target dot address. And then I want to remove. What do I want to remove? I want to look for the dollar sign, absolute, and I want to replace it with nothing because if you notice ours, you see ours, they don't have the absolute here, so we need to remove it. If we use target address, it's going to automatically come with those absolute dollar signs. We need to remove that. So the best way to do that is use a replace. So that's exactly what we are going to be looking for to see if it's found. So again, we're going to use that. Once we have that, I want the dot column, right? Close that out. Dot column. We want to look for that's the column. Close that out. Dot value, right? So if it's equal to, then exit the sub. Then exit sub. So basically, what it's going to do is just going to compare. It's finding the column, it's finding the row. Is the change that they made, is it exactly the same or not? If it is, then do nothing. Then exit the sub. Assuming that it is different, then what we want to do is we want to set our change cell. Where is that located? Well, that's located again in B15. Remember, we set it to B15. So range B15 dot value equals true. Set schedule change to true. But I want to go beyond that. I want to know, is there a specific change? Remember I said there's two different types of changes, right? There's a change if they make a change to a teacher, or they make a change to the room, or they make a change to start time or duration. That's not as important. All I need to do is just update that. But if they change any one of these, the from date, the to date, or any of the days, I need to set that differently. I'm going to set that as this should be day or date change, not date or date change. Day or date change, right? So I want to do that. So let's update. In that case, B16 is going to be true. So I want to differentiate. That'll come in a little bit later while it's important. So if, let's just do if not target. We're going to use these cells. I'm just going to copy these and then just clear the ones out we don't want. I'm really just focused on, again, two here. Going to focus on J9, L9, and then of course the M through 17. So that's all I want. So let's just remove those, and then this is all I want to focus on here. So in case the user makes a change to J9, L9, the from date, the to date, or any of the days is nothing, then I want to set something else. Then range B16 is true. Range B16. We know it's a day or date change. And that's going to really be really important, so we know to update those. Equals true. Set day or date change to true. Okay, so once we click the update, then we can go through it. Remember, once we click the update, we know if B16 is true, we can make those changes, or if B15 is, we can make those updates. Okay, good. I'm glad we got that done now because that's important. Now we want to focus on the students. I want to focus on getting these students enrolled. When I make a change here, I want students to be enrolled. But to do that, we need a new database. We're going to call that enrolled database. All right, so let's create that now. So I'm just going to create a brand new sheet, and then we'll call it enrolled student database. Double click here, and we'll call it enrolled, something very clear, enrolled student, and then database. And then I also want to make sure to update the name exactly as it's just so we're not confused. We don't need that for now. I want to make sure that our code name is exactly the same so we don't get confused. So I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to go into our VBA here, and I'm going to look for that new sheet that I just created called, let's see, we also have application flowcharts. That can stay. That's not so important. We're not going to be using that in the code. This one here, sheet 2, so that's the one I'm going to focus on. I'm going to go into the properties. Sheet 2 here, I'm going to paste that right in here. So enrolled student database. Now we have the same name here. So that's the one I want to focus on here. So what's it going to be here? So again, we're just going to call it enrolled. It's going to be a very simple database. We won't be using data mapping here. Enrolled student database. And then I'm going to put, probably I want the enrolled ID. I like having those unique numbers, especially when it's going to be a sharing and sync workbook. Enroll ID. Then I want the class ID. Have to know the class. Class name, we'll put that in here too. Student ID. And of course the student name. Student ID is important because student names can change, so IDs are always good to have. And then I want the row number here. That might come in handy. Okay, good. So we've got all that set up. That's going to be our student. So let's set up a named range for that because I want enrolled ID to have its own named range. We'll merge instead of that. We won't worry about formatting much on these simply because nobody's going to see them. So again, let's just put some numbers in here so we can see that, and then I'll just create a named range, a dynamic named range, as we always do. Easier, that's the best way to do it. So new, as we've been over this before in this series, equals offset many times. And then I want to use the header row, of course, one row down, comma, count A. Then I'm just, again, using the header row and going all the way down to a large number. We'll just go 999. And then, again, subtracting 1 because we don't want to include that, or comma 1. And then the column. Okay, tab out using the tab key, tab back in, and then make sure the dancing ants go around. Click OK. It's called enroll ID. That's the name. Okay, so we're going to close that out. We can now clear this out, or we can leave it here just for a moment. Then we're going to clear it out, and then I'm going to drag this all the way near our classes because I want what I'm working on close to what's near. So we have classes database schedule. We're not going to work on that yet. So you can move these things around when you're using them. Enrolled student database. And notice that we did have an next enrolled ID here. So why don't we write some equals if error, now that we have that, if error. And you'll notice a lot of patterns in here. Maximum of the enrolled ID plus 1, that's the next one. If there's nothing there, I want to default it to 1, or there would be an error if there's nothing there. Right now it's 4, but as soon as we clear out the data, it's going to revert back to 1. That's what I want. Okay, so we know the rest, so we can keep track of which one's enrolled. That enrolled ID, or the row here, we're going to place it right here, so we can always see that, the row here. So anytime we make a change, if I change a student, we can update that row. So let's write that in now. Now that we have that database, we can now start enrolling our students. We need to make sure to let the user know that if, of course, it requires a class ID, right? We don't have a class ID until we actually save the classes. So we're only going to allow our users to enroll students once the class is saved. So we'll give them a little message saying, please make sure to save this class before enrolling students. I think that's fair. And again, we're gonna be making some changes again. So we're gonna make some changes when we load this list of students. When I load the class, I want that list to load. That's a change, right? When we're changing that, but we need to differentiate between the type of change when the student list loads between the user actually making. That's where this one, enrolled refresh, comes in. Didn't rest. I guess we can use called enrolled load. Basically, it's the same thing. It's going to be true or false. So we want to make sure that B10 is false, right? B10 will go to true when we load a class, and we load those students in, then it'll go back to true. So we always want to know the loaded students in. All right, good. So we understand that. We can shrink this down so you can see everything here. You can keep it nice and tight. Okay, good. All right, so let's do that. Let's add that in. That's going to be based on worksheet change. We make the change, but we want to make sure that it's on just those items that we mentioned. So let's go back into the change event inside the classes worksheet, and that's what we're going to be focused on here. We're going to focus on not selection change, but up here, worksheet change event. We're going to write it here. Let's go down here and write it based on that. So it's going to call it on student add or change, but not on new classes or student list load. Okay, so fair enough. All right, so we know what the conditions are. Okay, so what range are we focused on? We're focused on, let's say we'll go for 100 students, so AR5 all the way through AR104. So that's the focus. If not, AR5 through AR104, AR5 through AR104. And what were the conditions that we spoke of? We want to make sure that B10 and range B10, that is where our loading, equals false. That's the student load dot value equals false. And also I want to make sure that AR and the target row value does not equal empty. I want to make sure that they've actually inserted a value there, right? False. And range AR and the target row. It's better when you do if target value equals empty, you're going to wind up with a lot of different bugs. I've had that. So AR and the target row dot value is much better. Does not equal empty. Then we want to do a few things. Well, first of all, I want to make sure if B7 is empty, B7 meaning there's no specific class row, it hasn't been saved yet, then I want to let the user know to please save the class before enrolling students. So we can write that up right now. If range B7 dot value equals empty, then message box, please make sure to save this class before enrolling students. Enrolling students. Okay, that's pretty clear because we got to have that information exit sub. Nothing we can do. Okay, continuing on now, assuming that we do have it saved, I also want to check to make sure, I want to make sure that we're not duplicating students. Notice we have 2 students. We can't have the same student twice. So we got to check on that and make sure we're not allowing for that as well. Okay, so to do that, we're going to set a few ranges here. So let's do that. So dimension the found student range as a range. And also I want to dimension the student row as I need to know the student row. We're going to be putting that information in there. So dimension the enrolled database row. I want to know if they've been enrolled. Just put enrolled database row as long. That's going to be helpful. We're going to need to know what row to place them inside the database, right? Because that's where it's going to be saved inside there. All right, so we're going to set the found student row, set found student called student range equal to student, because I want to look up their name inside there. Where they look at student database dot range. It's based on the student name. Let's double check that name. We want to make sure we got it right. So go into the name manager, student name. We're looking for this one, student names. That's what I want. So edit it, just copy that to make sure it's exactly right, although we can probably figure that out. But knowing me, maybe not. Student names. Okay, so I want to look and find their student names, and then we're going to use dot find. And then also, what do I want to find? I want to find the target value. I'm going to look their information up. I want to find to make sure that they exist, comma, and then look after. We don't need that. XL values, and then XL whole. I'm going to look that up. Good. So now I want to make sure if not found student range is nothing. That means they're found. Double negatives. Then we know they're found. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to now count it. I want to make sure that this student hasn't been added more than once. So the best way to do that is we can use COUNTIF, and we can use it directly in VBA. So why don't we add that here just to make sure, let them know has it been added or not. So let's add that in right now. Okay, pull it down here. Here we go. If we use application worksheet function, which function is called? Remember auto hotkey to automate that. So it's really count if, and we're going to count it if based on what condition? Going to base it on basically the entire range. Range, where's that AR5 through AR104? That's the range we're going to focus on. And also, what are we looking for? In this case, the target dot value. If it's greater than 1, then let the user know that it has already exists. So we need to let them know. Okay, we can do that with message box. This student has already been enrolled. So we don't want, because if they have a long list name, it's just easy to add them again in this class. A little more detail. Okay, before we exit the sub, I want to target dot clear the contents. Clear contents. Okay, and then exit the sub. That way we'll clear it out so they can enter a new one. Okay, just to make sure we don't have more than one student with the same name. That's good. Okay, now what I want to know is, what I'm going to do is, let's just say I'm going to put the row number. Now we have our database here. I want to put the row 3, 4, 5. I want to put that right along here inside AS. Now AS is going to eventually be hidden, or we're going to simply bring it over. We can actually clear that out and bring that over a little bit here, make it a little bit nicer. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to hide that, or using the font, I can change the font color, but I want to put that row right here. That way, if they make a change, if they change a student, all I need to do is determine the row of the database and update the name and update all the information based on that. So I can do that, but if AS is not blank, if AS is blank, then I know it's a new row here, new row. If it's not blank, then I know it's an existing row. So we're going to use AS to determine, column AS to determine if it's been previously, if a student's been previously saved inside that enrolled database. So we can run that check right here. So if not dot range AS and the target row and the target dot row dot value equals empty, then, so we'll just put some information here, newly enrolled, else, let's put else previously enrolled. Now they can change the student name, it's fine. Okay, so we have that. So to do that, now what we want again is we need this row. That's the row that we set up right here, enrolled database row. We're going to set that up right here. What's that going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to first available row plus 1, right? The first available row inside the student database, but we need to put in that database here, which is going to be the enrolled student database. When you get it wrong, so as long as that range comes up, you know it's right, because the IntelliSense is going to automatically make sure we got this through. So that's the first available row inside our enrolled database. So we've got that. Now, what if it is existing? Well, if it's previously added, we already know where it is. It's located right here in AS, right here. So that's the row. So previous, let's just call it current saved row. It's fine. Okay, so now we've got the row. Now we can fill the information regardless if they've been added before. We can now save the information. So what do I want to put? Well, in A, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the enrolled ID. Now I probably only need to do that if it's a new, so let's do that. In A, in other words, A is going to only be done, if it's already done, it has an enrolled ID already, so we don't need that. So enrolled, let's do that. Let's just put in here. We can actually put it right in here. Just copy this here, paste it, A, and we know the enrolled database, enroll database. We only have to write this once, then we can copy it. Dot value equals, where's it coming from, right? Remember, our next enrolled ID is located right here into B12. That's where we're going to place it. So we can just equals range B12 dot value. Okay, that's the next enroll. We only need that for new ones. Enrolled ID. Okay, and probably class ID is not going to change, right? If we're looking at, let's take a look at this database, class ID won't change, so we can do that for new as well. The class name might change, student, all of this, and this won't change. Row won't change, so we can add B and we can add F in there for newly enrolled students. It will never change for new, so we're going to do that. So now all I need to do is just copy and paste this, put in B, right? B, remember, this is for newly enrolled. This is for existing here. So inside B, we're going to put that class ID, which will not change. And that class ID is located, of course, is located in B5 equals range B5. dot value. Okay, so that's the class ID. And the last thing, which again is not going to change, is column F, and that is the row number. I always like to have the row number because it is that row number when we load it in that's going to be placed right here in AS. So we want the student name and we want the row number. So it's important to save that row number here in column F. So when we bring it over, so column F is going to do that. And then we're just going to change this to column F, and then it's going to be equal simply just this row number right here. We can paste it at that variable user. Okay, that's the row number. It's called database row. All right, good. So we've got that. So now we've got for new, we've got for existing. Now we need to add in the rest of it, and that's going to be regardless of whether it is a newly enrolled or an existing. We're going to place everything else in. So what is that we want to place in? Well, the first thing I want to put in is the class name, which theoretically could change. The class name is going to come directly from H7. So we're going to place that right inside here. So again, pasting in there, and that's going to go, let's copy this. Let's just copy this and make it a little bit easier on us. And that's going to go in column C. C is going to be called H7, I believe it was. H7 is going to take on that right here. H7 is going to take on the class name. Next up, we want to place inside our enrolled student base, I want to put in that student name, student ID. And the student ID, where's that going to come from? That's going to come from our student database. Now, we've already looked up the student. We know it's got the student database. Let's take a look in here. If we remember student database, it's going to be located in column A is our student ID. We've already looked it up. We already have found it. How do we know? Because it's found. If not found student is nothing. We've looked it up in the student names. We found it. Our student names is right here in the last column. This is our student names here. So we know the row. All we need to do is just determine whatever's in A in the row and place that in there. So student ID is going to go directly inside D. So that's next up. So how do we do that? D is going to be equal to, oh wait, let me make sure I messed that up. Class name student ID is in D. C comes from our class name. Let's make sure to fix that. I'm going to copy and paste it. We're going to use it here. And then we can use it up C, and there we go. Okay, good. C is going to take on our class name. D is going to take on our student ID. Student ID is located here in student database, range, A, and what's the row? It's going to be in our found student range dot row dot value. So that's our student ID. Okay, so we've got our student ID, we've got our class name. Now let's add in our student name. Our student name is simply, this is going to be C, not D. A, B, C, D. We've got to focus on E now. Learning my alphabet all over again. Okay, focus on E. E is going to be, of course, our student name. That's simply the target value, much easier than anything else. Equals target dot value. So now we've got this. Now we've got everything we need all the way through F. That's it. So now we've enrolled our student in the class. Another thing we do is we want to place that row. We want to place that row also right here inside AS. Well, it's only going to need to be placed there if it doesn't exist already. If it doesn't exist, and that's going to be based on the new. So here we're going to place it since it's previously enrolled and this is new. So why don't we place it right here? So range, again, AS, and the target dot row dot value equals what? It equals basically our row, enrolled database row right here. I want to place that there. So I want AS to go there too. Okay. All right. Let's take a look. Take a look inside our code. Let me fix that a little bit too. Range. Okay. AS. And we'll take a look, make a change here, see how that looks. Student has already been enrolled. Yes, it has. Good. That's cleared out. Nice. I like that. Taking a look here, added. Oh, perfect. So now we have the three. Let's left justify that so we can see them together here. And we'll take a look inside the enrolled student database. Enrolled ID 1, class ID. Let's double check the class ID. Make sure that it is class 1, which is here. That is correct. And we have our English name, our student ID, our student name, and our row. Perfect. Everything is good. That's just the way I want it. All right, very good. So let's enroll let's double click on here since it's already here. Double click here. And David Davis has already been enrolled. That's right. Fred has not. He's already there on the list. Fred is already. Tina is not there. Good. Let's take a look at Fred. Double click on him. Double click on David, and we don't have any more students, just 4. All right, fair enough. Now what we want to do is want to resort that list, and I want to write a macro that's going to load these students in and not only clear them out when we have a new class. So we should write that in. Well, first thing we want to make sure is when we have a new class, we want to make sure that we're already clearing that out. Let's double check that we're clearing it out. I'm going to go back into the classes macro here, and we're going to go into the new. We're looking for new. I don't think we've even done that yet. We have so much to do. All right, so we're going to write that up. New classes. Add new. We did. Good job. All right, but we do need to clear out anything. We didn't clear out anything, so we need to clear out all our ends. We got class data. Let's double check to make sure what that includes, because I don't know if that includes class data. Clearing that out. Okay, it doesn't. Notice that it does clear. It doesn't clear out this, so let's make sure to clear out AR, let's say 5 through AS 104. I'm going to add that in to there right now. So we can do that right inside. We can do here, right here. We've got our line here, so we can add it in AR 5 through AS 104. So we've already got that. Okay, good. So when we click add new, run that macro, everything's cleared out just the way I like it. Perfect. And now again, let's make sure we are not allowed to add students. Please make sure to save this class before enroll. Perfect. That's what we should clear the contents out too, shouldn't we? Right? Not letting that student out. So let's go back into the classes here. Sheet that says student has already right up here before enrolling students. So before we clear, target dot clear. We don't want to add a student, right? If I try that again, clearing, okay, clears the contents out. Good. I don't want to enroll unless I actually save the class. That's very important. Okay, but now what I want to do is when I load this, I want to load all of the students. Notice that we've enrolled students, but they didn't load in. If we take a look at the enrolled database, we see class ID 1 has 4 students in load, all the information, but I want to load that in. So what's the best way to do that? Well, again, simply an advanced filter. So that's really easy. I may add more information. Remember, we may decide to add more. Let's keep some columns open. So let's write in some criteria here. Let's use M, criteria. We're going to use an advanced filter based on the class ID. Criteria. And then what's it going to be? We'll use the class ID again. I want to copy that. I want to make 100% sure I get it right. And basically the class ID is going to be equal to whatever is in B5. So I'm just going to go over to classes here, scroll on over, and I'm just going to put in whatever's in B5 here. It's going to link it, so it's going to be a direct link. And we can center those, so then just drop it down a little bit so we can see them, make them clear. And remember, nobody's going to see this database, so we don't care really what it looks too much. We don't want to add too much formatting because it would increase the size. Okay, so we've got our criteria. Now let's just put our results right here, right next to it, results. What are we going to have in our results? All we really want is the student name, and then I want to put the row number here. So I'm going to copy that. I know I'm copying and pasting it, but I need, anytime you see issues, it's simply because the names are not correct. So we want to make sure that we get them correct. Okay, so again, we want that. I want to bring them right in here. I want to run an advanced filter based on this. Notice nothing would appear here, but unless we select one. So if I select classes and then I select the first one, which is this one, it's going to load up. It will load up as soon as we write that macro because it will be 1. So if we see the enrolled student, class ID 1, it's linked. All of these classes will, all of these enrolled students will show up here. I'll then take those names and I'll bring them directly into these columns, AR and AS right here. Okay, so let's write that up right now. All right, and back into our classes module. We're going to pack a lot of macros inside this module because it's a relatively big project and we don't want too many modules, so we can just pack it in here. We'll put it directly in here. Let's go back into the classes module here, macros here, and I don't believe we've written it up yet. We don't have a blank one here, so we can write a brand new one. That's no problem. Update lessons, create lessons, and we can write it in here. So sub, again, it's going to be classes, so class, and then load student list. And when do we want to run that? Basically, I want to run this macro as soon as we load a class. So this will go on the class load. Save, right? We have save down here, add new, load. So I'm going to put it at the bottom of this. This is the one I want to run. So it's going to load student list. So as soon as we load a class, it's going to run that. All right, so moving back into it, now we can start writing up some information. So the first thing, I just want to make sure that we've cleared everything out. So we're going to focus on classes with, let's see, classes AR5, I'll get all the way through A14. I want to clear those out just as we did inside the add new. But so we're going to do classes range AR5 through AS 104 dot clear contents. Okay, clear any existing enrolled. Once we've done that, we're going to focus directly on that student's database. So in the enrolled database, enrolled student database. That's the one. Click here. We make sure we got the name right. Okay, so again, we need the last row. Of course, we want that. The last row, I believe we've dimensioned that variable. Notice that we used the lowercase. We've already dimensioned it last week. So as soon as I change it, it changed to uppercase. That means it's already dimensioned. So we're good. So last row is going to be based on, of course, column A. So we're going to use XLR, and then we've already got the period there. That's going to be the last row. Once we know that last row, if it's less than 3, we can exit out. That means there's nothing there. If last row is less than 3, then exit sub. That means there's no data at all, so we don't need to continue on. Assuming that there is, we're going to write an advanced filter. So, and then this advanced filter, I've already written this using AutoHotkey to make it a little bit quicker on us. So we're going to use A2, but what are we focused on? We're going to focus on all the way through F. So A2 through F is where our headers are located. So that's what we're going to write in. So inside here, A2 through F, last row, this is correct. We want to make sure it is. Our criteria is going to be located in M2 through M3. So we're going to update that M2 through M3. And then our results are going to go inside what range here? Let's bring this down. Just 2 columns, N and O, N2 through O2. So changing this to N2 through O2. Then we need to make sure that we actually have data. So we're going to check that. So we're going to focus on our last result. I think I have this as defined. Result row. Yep, it's correct. Equals, again, I'm going to use XLR, but I'm going to change it basically on N, right? I want to use it N. This is going to tell us our last row of the results data based on the results coming in column N. So I want to know the last row here. If, of course, that last row is less than 3, then that means there's no enrolled students. So we need to check for that. That's the first thing we want to make sure of. So we can do that with this code here. So if the last result row is less than 3, then exit sub. No results. Okay, assuming that we do have results, what I want to do is I'd like to sort it by name. That's kind of handy, right? So we did sorting last week. Let's find that. And I'm just going to copy and paste. It's a lot easier. And then let's say we did on another module here. And then I'll just paste. Here we go. This is what I want to copy. We did this already when we sorted the student name, so there's no reason to keep rewriting it. It's already spending enough time. So, okay, close that out. Let's see here. This is where I want to be. Class save right here. So I'm going to paste that in here, but we need to make sure that everything is correct. So of course we're not focused on the student database. This time it's the enrolled student database. This is the one. Now we need to rewrite this database again because we're inside with source. So again, we need to set that database. And we're not going to be based on A3. It's going to be based on the student name, alphabetized. N3 is where our specific key is going to be located, N3. I'm going to sort ascending, which is correct. That's what I want, A to Z, sorting on normal. And our range is going to be, again, N3 through M. I believe that's correct. We can close this out. We can bring this up. N through O, and that's what it's N through O in the last result row, making sure that variable is correct, the same one we used last time, last results row. Okay, once we've run this sort, it's going to apply, then we're ready to continue on. Now all we need to do is just simply bring that data over. So classes here, dot range, AR5 through AS, and the last result row. But of course, our results start in 5 here, they start in 3 here, so we need to compensate for that. Plus 2 is the difference on that. Dot value is going to equal starting all the way over here. So again, dot range, we're already in the students, N3 through O, and the last results row, and the last result row. Okay, so that's going to bring it in, and that's all we need to do. We're good to go on that. Now we can load a class that's specific and see if it loads up, and then saving our work before running it, always to make sure. Going inside the classes here, and then we're going to load the same class that we just had, which is the fall here, and I want to make sure that those students, those variable not defined last result row, probably results. It's been defined. Results, okay, we're changing that. Here we go, results, not result. Okay, so let's just update that. Results everywhere. Can't remember where. Have put it so many places here. Results, adding the S onto that. Okay, I think we've got them all. Let's take a look, run that macro. Okay. All right, we don't want this running. Remember, we need to set something. One thing we didn't do when we loaded our students, we need to set B10 to true, right? So let's do that right now. B10 must be sent to true because we don't want this running when it's not happening. So let's do that. Let's exit out of there. When we load our students, we need to make sure we set B10. So let's do that. Classes And then B10 dot range, B10 equals true, and then we'll set it back to false, right? We want to make sure that we're setting it equals true. That way we won't trigger that. We won't trigger that like that fine because we changed too many at once. And then back to true. That's what's so important. Equals true. Remember, false. No, false, setting it back to false. So that's going to, remember, we set that up here. Here, let me just show you. B10 enrolled false. When we load that, we want this to go to true. When it's loading in, we want it to go to true and then back to false. Why is that important? Because we don't want to trigger what we just triggered. We don't want to trigger this one right here. This, I don't want to trigger this because this type of change only when the user actually makes a change. So we're checking if B10 is false. If B10 is true, it won't do anything. Now B10 is going to be true. When I load in that, B10 is going to be true and it's going to load them all here. Here we go. So it loaded them in. Perfect. Let's add some conditional formatting. This we're going to be hidden. So we can make this, I'm going to color this light gray. So enough so we can see it, but not enough so that just to remind us that it's going to be hidden. Now let's add some conditional formatting all the way down to, let's say, 104, which is about what our limit is here. And we're good to go. I'll just cover that. We shouldn't be hiding these rows here. So we're going to unhide those. And then AR 104. Okay, good. So we're going to go all the way down here. I'm going to add some conditional formatting just as we've done. And then we'll drop this down. Conditional formatting, new. And we're going to use odd and even rows because I want to color that. So, but it's got to be two conditions. Equals and. First condition is I want to make sure that AR and the row without the absolute dollar sign does not equal empty. I will make sure that. And then I want to use the mod row. Mod, just as we've done before. Mod, this is going to be for even rows, and then we'll write something up for odd rows. So on that specific, what do I want to do? So I'm going to copy this because we're going to use that in just a minute. AR5, not ARZ. Let's clear that out. AR5, that's what I want. Copying that, formatting that. I'm going to go with a fill. Let's say this is our current fill color. So I'll go a little lighter, and then I'll add borders all the way around the black borders. Clicking OK, clicking OK. And then what we're going to do is check that. Oh my goodness, look at that row. Nice. Yeah, 5. Okay, click OK, apply. Okay, that's good. That's the way we want it. Let's scroll up, make sure we've got everything covered the way I want. Okay, now we're going to add one new row, use a formula. Now we're going to base it on odd rows, which is going to change it to 1. I'm going to format those. The border is going to be the same, and the fill can be the same, but a little bit lighter. So I'm going to go into more colors, and I'm going to make it a little bit lighter here, just to give it a little bit of a contrast. Okay, I like that there. Click OK, and then OK, and OK. That's for the odd rows. Apply, and click OK, and then close that. Okay, we don't need that. Let's check that. That's a row, incorrect row. We need to update the applies to. So edit this again, changed again on me. Love that. That happens too. When you select a different row, click OK, apply. All right, we're good to go now. Okay, that's just what I want. Now I've got that dynamic. Now when we add students, we don't have any more students actually, but let's add them to this. We don't have any enrolled students. This is perfect. So we can add this here, this here. We can add David 2 students. Clicking back, 4 students. Clicking back here. All right, that didn't save. Let's take a look. Nope, didn't save. Let's take a look here. Scroll down our settings. Enrolled load, it still thinks it's true. So we need to make sure that when we load a class, it goes back to false. We must have missed that. Or I could blame somebody, but it's probably my fault. Probably my fault. Take a look. Now we set B10 to true, and we set it to false here. But what's happening? Well, what's happening is we're exiting out because there's no results before we set it to false. So we're better off not setting it to true until we're out. So let's go back in here. We don't want to set it to true until we actually loading some information here. So which should probably be right here and here. So we don't really need it. So we're only loading it. Remember, we're only actually loading it here. So essentially all we really need to do is set B true right when we're loading it right before. That's it. That's all we need to do. So theoretically we could just put B10 to true, load it, and then set it to false. That's essentially all we need. Not in the beginning. We don't necessarily need it here. Now when we load it in, it's going to work just fine. Okay, so now we load it in, selecting here, loading another class in, loads those students, loading it in here, nothing, which is fine. So now making sure that now we have B10 is set to false, which it is. Now it'll accept new students. Setting in, adding those 2 students in here and adding it in here. Okay, checking our enrolled student to make sure they got added here on class ID 2. Good, we got that covered. And now we're just going to select 1 and then 2 again, and now they're going to load up. Okay, perfect. Now that we've been able to add students, we also need to be able to remove students. When I select on a student, I want to be able to remove that student. So the best way to do that is with an icon, a pop-up icon, a little delete icon here. I also want to know what specific cell that we've selected on. That's kind of important, at least what student we've selected on. We can highlight just as we do with the classes. We also want to do the same thing with our enrolled students. So we got to do that. Let's take care of that now. First of all, again, I got to know which row we've highlighted. So why don't we add some conditional formatting. So we're going to start on that selected, we'll just call this selected student. And we'll put a row in. Let's start out with, let's say, whatever is 6. And then we'll give it that same look and color as we do. And then what we can do is move on from there. So what I want to do is I want to create an icon for that, add that icon in. So let's add in an icon here under the insert picture. And I'm going to select the delete. I've got one here. Delete, I'm going to use that. Let's size it accordingly. It's too big as it is. Something around 0.22. And then I want to place that icon right in here, but I'm going to place that icon automatically through VBA. And that way it's going to be a dynamic. So it's going to be based on the selected row. The first thing what I want to do is give it a name. So we'll call this delete student, and then we'll call this button. Okay, I'm going to hit enter, and I want to copy that because I'm going to save that. Now into VBA, the first thing we want to do in VBA is we want to hide that icon. So inside our VBA editor here, under the classes, the first thing we do on selection change, we're focused on selection change. If, just as we did with the color palette, if it's visible, I want to hide it. So if shapes, and then paste it in, delete student dot visible equals true, then hide it. Then shapes, again, paste it in, dot visible equals MSO false, right? We just want it hidden regardless, no matter what. So anything we select, it's going to be hidden, and that's what I want. I only want it displayed when we select a row. So when I make a selection, AR5 all the way through down to AR104, assuming we got to make sure that there's actually a value in there within that AR. We don't want that displayed on anything if it's not. So that's also on selection change. So we're going to focus on that. Let's put down here, we need to put some notes, right? I always like to load that selected. Let's just put down there on, and this would be on selection of let's say class, because I think that's important, on E. So we want to, and now we're going to be on selection of student. Okay, so what do we want? So if not, we're focused again on AR5 through AR, and then just use a larger 104, nothing, and we want to make sure and range. Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that there is a value in the target cell, otherwise we don't want to have, and range AR and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty, then, only then, right? We're only focused on there. First thing what I want to do is I want to put whatever that row we've selected, I'm going to place that directly in B18. That's going to be for our selection change and for our conditional formatting. So we're going to do that right now. So range B18 dot value equals the target dot row. And also we want to make sure now I want to present and display that specific shape. So with shapes, delete student button, I want to do something with it. Dot left, I want to place that directly inside on that, based on AS, right? Dot shapes, range, we can use the sheet, better use the sheet, it's always good because we're inside with sheet, right? We'll just use, let's say the sheet name, so classes, go with that, classes, dot range, AS, and the target, dot row, dot left. Okay, so that's the left position. The top position is going to be almost the same. So we're going to place it there, and then we'll probably move it one down from the top. Dot top is going to be equal to classes dot top, let's say +1, so it's one down off there. Dot visible equals MSO true. Okay, so we want to display, we want that visible, and then we'll add conditional formatting into that. Okay, so let's take a look at that and see what that looks like, and then we'll move on from there. We're going to need to assign a macro, and then there's that macro that's going to actually delete that student. So let's make sure we have it, and then we'll add our conditional formatting. Okay, so our X display, I don't really like it too much because it's a little bit off. So what we really need to do is move it over just a little bit. As we can see, it's hidden. We could also put it on the left side, right? The left of AR, that might be better. because it's hidden. So we got two choices because it's hidden up by the drop down list. So let's place it a little bit more over to the right. So we want to put a dot left, let's say plus 20. Let's take a look at that and see how that displays. Okay, so that's better. It's a little bit too far over, but I think that's going to work just fine. So we'll go with let's say dot 10, let's say 10 or something like that, or maybe 12. We'll be a little bit closer to where we want to do it. So let's try 12. And then what we'll do is we're going to create a macro that's going to actually delete that, but we need to resort that list once we do. Okay, that looks good. Now let's create the macro and then assign that macro because I wanted to be able to delete it. All right, so into the classes here, and make sure when we select anything else, it's disappeared. Only when we select it. Let's add conditional formatting onto that. We have that in here. We'll go all the way down to 104, which is here, which is our total columns, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add conditional formatting on that. So we're going to add a new rule, and we want that to supersede the current rule. So in this case, it's going to be equals, and then we'll select B18, which is our conditional formatting, equals, and then row. And then we're going to give it the same look and feel as we do with the rest of them, keeping consistent with our theme. So the fill effects is going to be just that. We're going to use this upper color here, and then this lower standard color. Then what we're going to do is we're going to click OK, and the font is going to be bold, and the font's going to be white. Clicking OK. And also when we when we refresh or load the student or add new, we need to clear that out. We need to make sure to clear out B18. Clicking OK, and then we'll double check. So we have that. Okay, so I like that, but when we load it, we need to clear. Now we need to clear out B18. So let's add that and also add the macro into that. So into the classes macro as we go, focused on, let's say save, but we're going to focus on add new. We want to make sure B18 is now. I'm going to add B18 to that cleared contents out, and probably on load as well. I want to clear that out. So let's take a look at some clear contents. We'll look for an existing one. Here we go, B18. Okay, we should probably also add when we load, let's take a look at this class load. We want to also make sure that we're adding the clear content B18. I also want to add in also the students. So let's do that here. AR5 through AR104. Okay, so that's going to clear the contents out regardless, which is what I want. So now as soon as we select a new class or an existing class, it's going to clear out. That's what I want. I don't want it displayed on that. I only want to clear it out. Perfect. Okay, so now let's just continue with that macro and deleting the students. Now keep in mind that when we have share and sync, in this case we're going to be sharing and syncing, that we have some rules that we have to follow. And the rules are, in this case, we can't not delete a row. We can't delete an entire row. We also cannot clear out the contents of more than one cell at one time within the database. Of course, when it comes to something like this, we can clear it out because this is not the database. So we can clear out entire ranges, no problem. But when it comes to a database, it's one cell at a time, and we cannot delete rows, right? Because if we delete this row, the other users, it's going to be completely messed up for the other users. So once we add a row, that row must remain consistent. But here's what we can do. We can clear out the class ID. We can clear out individual cells by using a loop. So what I'm going to do is just simply loop through that, clearing out the class ID, the class name, and the student name, and all this information. So we're going to just simply run a loop from column 2 all the way to column 6. So that's all we need to do, keeping in the enroll ID. Now also keep in mind, as soon as there's a missing class ID, it's not going to show up here. So as soon as we clear out this class ID, it will not show up here. The student will not show up here. Okay, so let's do that right now. So all we need to do is determine the row, assuming there's a row, clearing it out, leaving the enroll ID. That's why we set an enroll ID, because it maintains the row, it maintains the number. That's why we always want to keep that consistent. But we clear out the class ID, which will then remove it from here. Okay, so we're going to add that in right now. That's just a little bit of a macro. Let's do that now. Okay, so we're going to call this, let's add students, show student. We'll put that macro anywhere inside the classes, which is fine. All right, right about here, select color. Here is good. So we're going to call this sub class delete student. Okay. First of all, we want to make sure that the user does intend to delete it and they didn't click it by accident. So we're going to start out with a message box. If message box, are you sure you want to delete this student? And then we'll give it a VB yes or no. And then also we're going to give it a title called delete student. And okay, once we have equals VB no, then exit sub. If they don't want to do it, nothing we can do. Okay, considering now we need to make sure that B18 contains a row. If B18, which is our selected student, we need to make sure that there's a value here, and then the next thing, we need to make sure that there's actually a row number located in AS. So we're going to run those two checks before we actually delete a student. So if, let's go down here, let's go with, probably not classes. We're going to do most of the work on the enrolled database. So if classes dot range B18 dot value does not equal, well, let's just say equals empty, then probably exit the sub. I was going to say message box, but not necessary. Okay, then exit sub. Okay, add that sub in there. Next up, if, okay, let's dimension the selected row. Let's call this enrolled database row as long. And then I want to make sure that's the list, and now we'll also do selected rows long. I think that's good too. Selected row as long. Okay, so the selected row we know is going to be located in classes B18. So let's copy that and then just put it in here. Selected row is going to equal, and that's the selected row. And also we're going to enroll database row is going to be equal to whatever is in classes range AS and the selected row dot value. Okay, that's the enrolled row. Now I just want to make sure it's not 0. Enrolled row, database row. If enrolled database row, sometimes it's good just to copy and paste these to make sure you got it right. I should do that more often. Enrolled database row does not equal 0. If it's equal 0, then exit sub. Okay, so now that we know it's got a value, it's not 0, so we can then actually clear it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another one here. We're going to call this enroll database column as long. Okay, so we've got 2. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run a loop. Remember, we said inside that enroll database all the way from 2 to 6. We're going to run that loop. So let's do that right now. Let's run that loop. Because we have to do this because it's sharing and sync. Otherwise, if it's not sharing and sync, just delete the row. That's fine too. But in this case, also keep in mind that if you are going to specifically not sharing and sync and you are going to delete the row, make sure that instead of the actual column, you're going to be putting in something like equal within VB equals row. Okay, so you need to do that because this way when you delete a row, this will automatically update. Because we're never deleting rows, we can put the value and we don't need to put a formula in there. I don't want to put a formula unless it's absolutely necessary. But when you delete rows, if you don't have sharing and sync, you do need to put in the formula here. That way these row numbers will update automatically. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's important because you have to update that. All right, continuing on, let's go ahead and then finish out this little macro here for enroll database column is equal to 2 to 6. And then we'll just do next enrolled database column. It's always better to copy and paste these variables to make sure we get it because I get them wrong so often. So we're going to say, so focus on this specific database. So enrolled database dot, and that's not enrolled student database, that's the right name, making sure you tell us dot cells. We're using cells because both the row and the column are dynamic. Our first is enrolled database row, and then we'll just copy that here to make sure we got it right, comma enrolled database column here dot cleared contents. That's it. So that's all we need to do, and that's going to automatically clear out those for each one of them. Then all we need to do is run the student load again. Once we load that, we can then run that student. So we just need to copy that macro, write down, let's pull that macro here, clearing out that student. Probably should have been, the macro should have been placed there. So let's update that. All right, here it is right here. I'm going to put that macro right here, enrolled student list class. I want to reload this list automatically. So we delete that. Okay, and then we're going to do that right here, class load. I should probably put that, delete student. I'm going to put this, just so we're clear on this, I want to put this specific macro directly under the add student so that they're together. So let's bring this up a little bit so we can see more. And then I'm going to drag this up here. I'm going to place that entire macro under that student right here, which is this one right here, class student list. So I'm going to put it right there, and then I'm just going to enter that. So that way we have our load student list, and then we have our delete student. I think that makes sense to have them together. Okay, so after we do that, we want to hide the icon, right? So classes dot shapes, and if you're not sure about that, delete, I believe it was delete student, and then button. I'll double check that name, and then dot visible equals MSO false, right? We don't need that once we've deleted the student. So let's take a look. I also want to clear out B18. Classes dot range B18, the select row dot clear contents. Right? That select row should also be there. So let's save our work, take a look at that. I want to double check this button name here, and then we can move on from there. Now that we have that here under the classes here, selecting one and then right click, delete student button, that looks correct. And so now we just need to simply assign the macro that we just created here. So assign macro under the classes, and then we'll just focus on delete student. That's the one we want to assign, clicking OK. Okay, so I'm going to save the work. I'm going to go with, take a look if we have any issues. Lisa Lopez, I'm going to delete her. Are we sure? And click no. Okay, that works. This time we're going to click yes, clicking yes. Okay, deleted her. Perfect. That's exactly the way I want it. Remember, these numbers are going to be hidden. We can change the font color on those to the same as the back. All right, so now we're able to delete students. I also want to be able to automate these. We didn't do that yet. When we select the term, I want to automate this date. So that's relatively simple. On change of H9, but not on class load. Okay, so what do we want to do when we make a change to H9? That's when we want to actually automate based on that date. So based on what's in the admin. So when we look here under the scheduling and settings, what I want to do is when I make a change, I want to locate the term. Once it's found here, I want to set the from date to whatever's here, and I want to set the to date to whatever's here. Only on the change and only on when it's not loading. So let's add that in right now, and that's going to be on the change event inside the classes. So we're going to go back into the classes, we're going to focus on the change event, which is up here, worksheet change event. And we're going to say, okay, so we can write it here anywhere. So let's say here, again, with our comment, on change of term, but not on class load. Okay, so what is that? That's going to be based on H9, and we need to make sure that, of course, the class is not loading, and that's going to be just like we did, and B4 equals false. So basically the same exact thing that we did right here. I'm just going to copy that, and B4 equals false. Then what do we want to do? Then, two ands, we don't need that. Then we're going to check to make sure if it's term. So let's take a look at that. So how do we know if there's a term? So we have that set up here. We already know the row of that term because we put it in before, located right here. The select term row is B18. Remember last week we added it in here. If for some reason we enter the wrong term or it's new, like we're new class, we know that B8 is going to be specifically blank. So if it's blank, then we know that there's nothing to do there. So we just need to make sure that it's not blank, and then if it is, then we can go ahead and add it in. So if it's not blank, why don't we add that in here? And range B8 dot value does not equal empty. Okay, so we can add that in there. So now all we need to do is just set the row, and we know that. So we can do it pretty easily. So we're going to say simply, we're going to focus directly on the from date. So what is that from date? That's located right here in J9. J9 is going to be equal to whatever is in AY, admin AY, and then that row. So let's add that in. We can do it really easy. So range A J9, which is the from date, J9 dot value is equal to admin dot range AY and what? Where's that row? It's basically based on range B8 dot value. That's the row dot value. That's the from date. To date is going to be very similar, except it's going to be located directly in L9. So we're going to copy that, and actually we can copy all of it and just update this variables in the cells here. So J9, this is going to be L9. If we take a look inside here, drop this down a little bit, and then go into the classes, we see that that's located, the 2 days located in L9. So we know that, so we can just automate that. Okay, so L9, of course, is not going to be no longer on AY, but this one's going to be focused on AZ. So AZ is going to be here, same row, and this is going to be not the from date, but this is going to be the to date. So to date, and then we're not using variables in this, but that's fine. We don't necessarily need, it's just a very short code. So we just need to make sure that B8 contains a value, otherwise we can't move on. Okay, so we're going to save our work, and let's try, but of course it's not on load. So when it loads up, nothing's going to happen there, which is good. Now when we add that term in here, we want to automate that. Perfect. So That's just what I want. So now notice how the terms are automating based when we load it. Okay, we've got that covered. That was relatively easy. Let's continue on. There's a few small things we've got to do some cleanup work before we get to the lessons. Now notice this little icon here. When I switch tabs, I want to make sure that that icon is gone, right? It's hidden, but it's not. It's somewhere about right here. It's actually here. Take a look at that. It's just hidden because it's white. But I want to make sure that icon's hidden on, and then I want to make sure it's displayed here. So even though you can't see it, if we move it up here, you can see it. So we need to make sure that is on. So that's called the class icon. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to base it on the tab switching. So that's selection change based on at G5 all the way through J5. So that's we need to work on that. Let's go back into that worksheet and then gonna go down to selection change right here. E5, let's find where we focused on that selection change right here. Down here, these is where I focused on the tabs. These are all the tabs were. First thing I wanna do, so let's make sure it's hidden, but we don't know if it exists or not. So I wanna hide it automatically. So again, on air, resume next, just in case it doesn't exist. Shapes, paste it there, class icon, dot visible. That means for any tab, it's going to be hidden, equals MSO false, just in case it doesn't exist. And then that's where we're going to wrap it in on air resume. Now, I only want it displayed when we go into this general tab. That's the only where I want it. So I'm going to copy this here, and then we're going to go directly into this general info tab, and it only exists. So I'm just going to click on definition. Sorry, it was off the screen, but right click definition. Now here's the specific tab here. We want to locate that. I want to go into that. It's right down here, general info. So here I want to display it. So again, on air resume next. I could have just copied that, and then classes, because we're got to specify the sheet in this case. Then dot shapes dot equals MSO true, and then on air go to 0. Okay, so that should cover it there just in case. So now when we schedule it, now it's not here. We can't find it here, but it's here and it's displayed here. Actually, it's here. We moved it over, but basically all we need to do is assign it again, and it'll end up in the right place at the right point. So computer here. Okay, so now it's going to be, actually this is English, so we should put the right icon there, right? Okay, English is there, and now it's gone here, and it's back. It's not here anywhere around here, and now it's back here in its right place. Okay, good. So we've got that covered. Now, as we get into the lessons, I want to add some conditional formatting and some protections onto that. Notice, right, in our admin here, we have some scheduling here, but let's just say we're not working on Sundays, right? I want to make sure that we can't schedule classes on Sundays because the school's not. Let's fix that issue. We don't need that. I'm going to update this. If target dot count large is greater than 1, then exit sub, then exit sub. Okay, that'll handle that error because we don't need that on selection change. Now when we select more than one, it's just going to exit out. Okay, so if for some reasons we're not working on a Sunday, I need to make sure that we're not allowed to schedule lessons or classes on a specific Sunday. So we need to let them know. So let's add in some additional formatting based on that, right? Sundays, right? Same thing here. Let's do that here. When you see that highlighting more, let's change that to 1, and that's going to automatically reset it. Now again, when we highlight that, now it's not going to happen. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make sure that when this Sunday is not a school day, I want to actually make it more difficult or impossible for somebody to actually schedule a class on that unless they change it. So first thing we're going to do is add some conditional formatting. We're going to create a new rule, and it's going to be based on what is in the admin sheet. So we're going to select here and then go over to the admin. Now I want to know if this is equal to blank, equal to empty. That is when I want it, but I want to make sure it's going to be for every single cell in that range or every single row. So I want to take that also out. I'm going to format it. In this case, I'm going to give it a fill of our color, our base color here, and I want to give it a font of just a little bit darker than that, so it's harder for them to see and they understand that it's not visible. So clicking OK on that, and that's what it's going to do. Clicking OK here, and that's what I want to do. It's making sure that that's now highlighted. So when I click on Sundays here and go back into the classes, it's now available, and when I go back in there, it's unavailable. So now we also want to make sure that they can't click on it. So if they click on it here, we want to make sure that's not checkable, right? So how do we do that? That's just on some selection change updates within our cells. So let's get into that selection change and make that update. So that's under the, again, classes based on selection change where we are. And we're focused on M117. But before we add this information and before we hide or check or uncheck this, we need to add that caveat. So we can do something like if admin.range. Now what is that range? What is that we're focused on? Let's go back to the admin so we know exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at AY, and this one starts in specifically, let's highlight in row 5. This starts in row 5, notice that. But what about our classes? Our classes are going to start in row 11, right? So what do we do? So what we need to understand, there's a 7-row difference on that. So admin AY and the target dot row minus 7. I want to check the admin. Dot value equals empty, meaning there's not selected. Then let the user know. Message box, please make sure schedule lessons. Make sure to schedule classes on school work days, I guess we could days, or update the school work days within the admin, and then we'll just let the user know scheduling section. That's good. That prevents us from scheduling on non-school work days. Scheduling section. Okay, good. So we've got that, and then we can exit out. Nothing we can do. In fact, before we do that, I want to clear the contents out. But to do that, I want to make sure that we disable enable events, because otherwise we're going to create a loop. We're going to create a continual loop. So the first thing is application.enable events equals false, and then we'll send it back to true. So, and then I'm going to clear the contents, target.clear contents. If we don't disable events and or enable events, it's going to create a loop. So application.enable events, now we can make it true again, equals true. Okay, so that's going to do it. That's going to automatically deselect it. So let's reset and let's save our work here. And now we're going to try to schedule on Sunday. We'll get that message box. All right, and then exit sub. Actually, we need to make sure this is 6, not 7. The difference between 5 and 11 is 6. Math, Randy, math. Okay, there, take a look. Let's take a look inside here, and we'll see how that works. Going back in, we try to select Sunday. It says, please make sure that schedule classes on school work days or update the school work days within the admin. Okay. It doesn't let us select anything else, and it clears the contents out. That's exactly what I want to make sure. If we go ahead and select Sundays here in the students, then go back in the classes, we are now allowed to schedule. It's perfect. That's exactly what I want. All right, now that we've got that, we can start adding in and creating those lessons. So let's do that. The first thing what I want to do is I want to get a date. So we have a start date here. And I want to know which days of the week are we going to actually be creating lessons. So let's say we want Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I want to create lessons based on those days, based on how many days we have. So for example, if we have terms, let's set this up to a later term, probably a larger term, something after the current date. And then I want to make it smaller. I don't want to create that many lessons. Okay, so we can create lessons based for, let's say, from June 30th to July 17th, and we want to create them every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on dates, only on those dates. So the best way to do it is have a base date, a foundational date, and then update that on every week. So we can start on that way. Let's say here, I'm going to create this, we'll call it base week date, and then it's going to be basically this date minus 1. So we're going to have VBA create it for us. But then I want to create based on this date, based on whatever date, the weekday here, I want to create a date, or I want to keep it blank based on the day of the week. So we'll start this out on Monday, and then we'll just create a specific cell for each day of the week. So this will kind of help us. So we're going to go all the way to Sunday on this one. And I'm just going to give these a color here that differentiates that particular. So let's go with just this green. Let's go with a more color here, standard color. I'll go with a green here so we can stand out. And then I also want to do the same thing for the base date, but just a little bit of color. So that way this is going to stand out because it is quite different than what we were working with. Okay, so we'll add that on. That's too dark. I can't see that. I can't see the text there. Not good, Randy. Okay, there we go. So now we just color that. So I want to create dates based on that. We're going to increase that a little bit. And so this date will be, let's say it's going to be 6/29. I want it one less because we're starting on this date. I want the first one to be, so June 20th. I also want to format these. I want to make sure we see the year on that. So let's do short date here for all of them. Okay, so I want a formula here that's going to help us understand what is the next date. So as this day changes, we're going to increment this date by 7. VBA is going to do that for us. So we're going to add 7, then determine all the days of the week. If it's blank, if this is blank here, we're going to put a blank date. But if there's a check mark, I want to put a date based on here, based on this date plus whatever. So we need a formula to help us with that. So what kind of formula are we going to use? Well, we can start out by checking to see if it is a scheduled day or not. So if Then we'll say, I'm just going to select this day. If this is blank, Monday, so we're just going to start equals, if this is blank, this Monday is blank, equals empty, then of course empty, equals empty, then we're going to empty. Otherwise, I want to put a formula, right? So if there's no date, we're going to keep there. Otherwise, basically what I want to do is I want to start it out based on B21, based on this B21, but I'm going to bring this down for all of them, so I'm going to use the absolute. I'm going to subtract. The first thing what I want to do is subtract 7. Why is that? Because I want to go 1 week before that and then simply add those days based on that. So we're going to subtract 7. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding in based on the day of the week. So based on that, so it's going to be, again, this case 7. So we're going to add 7 minus based on the weekday. So we're going to use the weekday function here. And the weekday of what? It's going to be based, again, on that B21 here, absolute there. So we're going to based on that weekday. And, of course, we're going to use 2. I want to use the 2 because our days start on Monday just like we do here. So I want to start it on Monday, which is 2. So our weekday function is going to be 2. And then I want to add 1 to that, adding 1 to that to make sure that is that the first day of the week. And then close that. Okay, so basically that's what I want if it's selected here. Okay, so let's select it and make sure we have a date here. Let's select it here and make sure we have a date here. Now it's 6/28. Okay, good. I want that, but I still need to do some more. I still need to subtract it because I can't have it under that date. So how do we do that? Well, we can do an or statement. I need to make sure that that Monday is not before that. So we can copy this here. I'm going to copy this formula right here, and I'm going to run a check. So now it's going to, we want a blank or in 2 conditions. M11 equals blank, or what's the other condition? The other condition is this result is less than, in this case, it's going to be 21. J9, from date, J9. This is the J9. I want to make sure it's less than that. If it's less than that date, then in either one of those conditions, then leave it blank. Otherwise, we're going to add it in. So it's going to be blank in that case, okay? Because obviously 28 is less. So now what I want to do is basically drop this down for all the cells, but I do need to make an update. Notice this is +1. I want to make this one +2 because it's one more day of the week. +2 and here +2. And I want to do the same thing here. +3 in this case because we're focused on Wednesday, and that's 3. And then we're just going to do the same thing for each one, and then adding and the next day is going to be 4 and then 5. So notice Wednesday now, because why? Wednesday is greater and Wednesday is selected. So notice how Wednesday appeared here. Thursday shouldn't, but Friday should. So let's continue on with that. That's going to really help us. Now, as I change this date, everything's going to go on, going to continue on. So we're going to make this Thursday is going to be 4. We're going to add 4 onto that. And 4, I know this formula is a little bit confusing, but basically it's going to take that formula and it's going to, based on the day of the week, it's going to either display or not display. Making this 5 here, it's kind of a little bit hard, 5, and then 5 here. Okay, continuing 6, and then we'll be done with this formula. That's going to help us in VBA, because within VBA, all we need to do is just check to see if the day exists. If it does, add it in. If it doesn't, we won't. Okay, the last one being 7. And 7. Okay, that's what I want. So now Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but notice, but as soon as we add another day, so if I make this, let's just say 7/5, it's going to, if I add a week onto this, it's automatically going to stay. So if we make this, let's say 7/5, notice now Monday, Wednesday, and Friday are all selected here. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. Okay, so now we can continue on. Let's go back to 629, 6. Now we can write the macros. That's all we need to start writing our macro to help us automate this. So notice Wednesday and Friday, but then when we add the week, it'll continue each day. So now all we need to do is simply loop through these. If there's a date available, then create a lesson for that date. So we can do that inside VBA. So let's save our work. And now we're going to go into the VBA and write a macro to create those lessons. So I really want to write 2 macros, 2 distinct macros. One for new classes, we want to create those lessons. And then I want another macro for updating lessons. So if there's been a change, I want to update those lessons, and it's all going to be based on a specific database, a brand new database called lessons database. So let's create that database right now, and then we're going to bring it over. We're going to call it right here, and we're going to call this lessons database, lessons database. I'm also going to copy this. I like doing this, copying it just to make sure our code name is exactly the same. So that way it's consistent. It's not confusing if we don't. And so for that sheet, the first thing I'm going to do is go in here and then go into sheet 4 here, which is the just one we created. And then we're going to update that. I'm going to copy that and make sure that code name is exactly as the sheet name. So that's the one we created, lessons database here. All right, so what are we going to have inside this? I also want to drag this over and put it right next to our classes, because I think that's going to be helpful for us to automatically, because we're going to have to switch back between classes in the database a lot. So we have enrolled students, fine. So what do we want inside that lesson database? Well, again, I want a lesson ID, just as we always do. We're going to use data mapping a little bit in this one. So we're going to put it lessons ID. I want that lesson ID in the first column, just as we do. Lesson date, I want to know the date of the lesson. Also, I want to know the class ID, each class, that's very, very important. The lesson time, and I want to know the duration of that. I also want to know the teacher and probably the teacher ID. We're going to save that. I want to put that teacher names change, but IDs don't. So that's the room or location of that specific lesson. We want to know that. I want to, because that could change on a per lesson basis. Theoretically, we could move a location. And then assigned exam. I want to be able, we're going to do that from the schedule, but we're going to assign an exam. We won't do that now. We can assign an exam, a test, or any kind of assignment to a specific lessons. Notes, and then I'm going to want the row. I want to also want the row number. And again, also we want to put some criteria. I'm going to possibly put some columns, leave some columns blank just in case we want to. There's a likely chance that we may want to add to this, but I also want to add some criteria in here. So I'm going to put criteria because we're going to run an advanced filter because we need to know all the lessons associated with a specific class. So I'm going to know the class ID. And also I want to make sure the lesson date. I'm going to use that because I want to know if we're going to make a change to a specific lesson. Let's say we need to update lessons, right? Let's say we've changed the day of the week, but I only want to update those lessons in the future, not in the past, right? We can't change a lesson that already happened in the past. So I'm going to write some criteria that we're going to focus greater than the current date. So it's going to be equals and then greater than, and then we'll end the quotation marks, and today, parentheses. Okay, so what that's going to do is automatically based on the current date. That's exactly what I want. All right, let's just give that some colors just so we can differentiate that. And then what I'm going to do is just so we can know, we also want to automate the class ID. The class ID is going to be based specifically on a single cell. So it's going to be equal to what? The class ID is going to be always be the selected class located directly in here inside B5. Okay, so we've got that already. That's going to be our criteria because why is that important? Because I want to load all of those scheduled lessons directly in here, and I only want it based on the specified class list. So all those lessons are going to come into here. So we need to run that criteria in the advanced filter in the lessons database. I also want to have those results come in. And where do I want to put those? I'll put those results here. Let's just say, but I want the results exactly like based on that. Let's going to shrink these down because we're not going to use those yet. So I'm going to put the results right in here. But what results do I want? Well, I pretty much want what's located in here. Pretty much I want to directly copy this here, right here, just the way we have it. And then I want to bring it in here. And I'm going to copy this. And although the lessons aren't exactly, but I want to help. In other words, the names aren't exact. I'm just going to paste the values here. But I also want the ID of the lesson. So I'm going to bring it over here. So what do I want? I want to put the lesson ID. I want to put the date, the scheduled on, which is the date. But remember, the headers must be the same. So I'm going to put in this case, I'm going to copy these. I'm going to put those right here. So I want the class ID here. I want the lesson date here. And then what else do I want? I want the start time, the duration, the teacher name, attended is going to be a formula, so there's nothing we can do on that. That doesn't exist. I'm going to leave that blank because that's going to be based on a formula, and then I want the notes. So let's just do start time, duration, and teachers. I'm going to bring in, I want to make sure it's exactly like that. So we're going to do that, the lesson time, because I want it exactly like that. Let's capitalize this here, and let's just call this start time, probably start time. It's kind of start time, kind of duration and teacher. So I'm going to copy these. Remember, we want the headers exactly the same, and we're going to put them right in here. I'm going to paste those values in here. Start time, duration, teacher. I'm going to leave it blank, and then we're going to go to notes. So leaving it blank, and I want the notes. I'm going to copy those notes. Whatever notes have been assigned to that, I'm going to paste it right here. Now, because we're leaving it blank, we can get rid of these. We don't need these. Those just kind of help us to know the order. And I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste the formats in here. Now, here's something very, very important here. What we want to do is notice we have a blank one. So the only way we can run an advanced filter and have a blank the results is to make sure that our original data. So when I run that advanced filter, I'm going to use column L. I'm going to include column L because column L is blank. That way we won't run a bug because we have a blank here and a blank here. So we're going to do that. That's going to help us out. All right. So what I'm going to do is just add call this lesson database. I know this is an extra long training, but in this series, they're all going to be long because we've got tons to cover. I'm going to add data mapping on some, but not all. So I'm going to just basically give it that gray color for using data mapping, and then put some, and then we'll just merge and center this here so we know that. But again, it's not too important here as far as the look and feel because this is going to be hidden. It just kind of gives us an idea. Okay, so we do have a class ID. That's in B5 of our classes. We do have a start time. That's going to be in H13. We have a duration. Duration is going to be in J13. We also have a teacher. Teacher is going to be in J7. And these are all based on this here. All based on here, general info. So again, we have our start date located in J9. We have our teacher located in J7. We have our time here located in H13, and we have our duration here. So we want to put all that inside the database. The teacher ID, well, that's going to come, we already added that in, but that's going to come from column B. Our teacher ID is located right here in B14. So let's add that in right now. Teacher ID B14. And then the last thing is room location. We're not going to worry about any of this, so we'll let VBA take care of that. Assigned, in this case, the assigned exam is going to be done through the schedule. Notes are going to be done through the schedule. Row, we're going to automate that with VBA. So the last thing is really want room or location. That's going to be J11. Okay, that's it for data mapping. So all we really need to do is loop from column 3. In this case, all we need to do when we loop that data mapping, all we're going to do is we're going to do column 3 all the way, in this case, to column 8, and that's it. So we're just going to loop through column 8. Of course, we do need the lesson ID named range, so I'm just going to add in our dynamic named range just as we always do, and we're going to call it lesson ID. So again, formula is name manager, and we need new one. We're going to call this lesson ID. Good for enough. And again, offset, as we have been doing, using the header, one row down. This is how you remember things. Count A all the way starting at this and going all the way through whatever large number. We're going to use the variable that have a large number, so we'll just do 9999. And then -1, excluding the header, comma 1. Tabbing out, tabbing in, click OK. Now, if we remember correctly, click close, we're good. If we remember correctly, we have inside our classes, we have a next lesson ID, but we didn't add the formula in, so we can do that now. Equals, if error, max, lesson ID, you get the hint because we're doing it so often, the same thing, +1, comma, if there's an error, because there's no data, we're going to leave it at 1. It's 4, again, back to lesson ID, clearing out that data, it's going to return that lesson ID to 1. Okay, good, that's just what I want. So now we have that. Now we're ready to move on and add that code. So we've got everything we need. We got our database ready. We're ready to add those lessons all the way here. Good. Okay, let's continue on and write that macro in there. I'm going to go back into that, and we'll create a macro inside our classes. That's the one I want to focus on, classes. Everything's going to be in classes. We'll put it down. Let's take a look at select class icon. We can put it all the way down here. That's fine. Show icon right under the icon. Okay, so the first macro that we're going to write is, call this sub. We can start out with classes again, class, and then called create lessons. Create lessons. All right, we can get rid of this. We're not going to need that. We need to dimension some variables on that. So we're going to need to know dimension the lesson row as long. I also need the lesson column. We're looping it through lesson column as long. I also want to know how many lessons that we need to create. Lesson quantity as long. And I also want to, as we're moving through the lessons, as we're looping through them, I need to keep track of which lesson we're on. So we're going to call that lesson number as long. Also, we're going to loop through the days, right? Remember the days of the week, Monday through Sunday. We need to keep track of which day we're on. So we're going to call this day row as long. And also, I need to know the lesson ID. That's going to be as long. And also a clear row. If we're going to be clearing a specific row, I'll show you what that is, as long. And then we need some dates, right? Dimension the start date as a date. I want to put that as a date. And also, of course, the end date as date. Okay, so that's our variables there, so we're good to go. So the first thing we want to do is I want to add in the start date. What is that start date? I want to keep track of that. That start date, of course, is located right here inside Let's get rid of that. Oh, we have that already, but it's blank. So let's take a look at that. Must have added it already here. Oh, here it is. We don't need that. Okay, so we'll keep it. We'll keep this. I'm going to copy this one, but I didn't realize we created the create lessons. That's fine. No worries. Reset that. Didn't realize we'd done that. We did a lot of things. Okay, so create lessons. The next one's going to be update lessons. Let's focus on the create lessons. Okay, so what we want to do is a start date based on J9 and of course the to date all the way from L9. So let's put those into variables now. So here the start date is going to be equal to classes dot range J9 dot value, and then we'll call that the from date. Keep it consistent, from date or start date, either way in this case. And also we'll want the to date. In this case, we're going to call this the end date. You can equal, and then we can just simply copy this and then paste, update that accordingly. It's going to be located in L9, and then we're going to change that, of course, to the to date. Both are the same. Okay, because we need those to understand how we're going to be entering. Okay, continuing on. Once we have that, what I want to do is I want to set B21. Remember, we need to set that base weekday, but basically I want it to be whatever was in J9 or located or start date minus 1. I'm going to place that directly in B21. So we're going to do that here. Classes dot range B21 dot value, and that's going to be incremental as we move through, equals, call this the start date minus 1. Set the base date. And set that. That's going to be based on week. That'll automate all the dates once we place that in there. And then I want to make sure that what I want to do is I want to determine, I want to know how many classes we need to create, because we can't go on forever and ever. I want to make sure that it's going to be all the way to the end date, but I want to know how many total classes we're going to create. So we're going to create something called lesson quantity. That's going to determine, so we can run our loop and then we're going to stop as soon as we hit that lesson quantity. But how many are we going to create it? Well, we can use just a few formulas for that, and we can do that inside VBA to do that. So I want to know if, let's say classes dot range M11, which is that Monday, M11 dot value does not equal empty, then, right, that's the Monday, lesson quantity is equal to, we're going to use date difference for this. Date difference, that's going to help us determine how many Mondays are inside that. Date difference, and then we're going to say, well, based on the weekday, so week, I want to know how many with the start date, between that start date, end date. I want to count the Mondays, end date. How do we do that? We use VB Monday. That's going to help count us how many Mondays are in that day. Okay, great. So that's going to tell us M11, but that's only Mondays. But what do we want? But what I want to do is I want to create something for every single day, not just that. So what about M12? If M12 doesn't equal empty, then what I want to do is, but I want to add in whatever quantities we've already created, right? So we've already possibly added in. So this one's going to be equal to lesson quantity plus Tuesdays. This one's going to be VB Tuesday. I'm just going to repeat that for every day of the week, VB Tuesday. Okay, great. So now all we need to do, again, update that. So that's going to keep track and determine all the total lessons. So I'm going to do one for Wednesday, one for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, good. So now all we need to do is just update those ranges: 13, 14, 15, 16, and Sunday on 17. And now we need to update the Tuesday, and then we're just going to change this to VB Wednesday, and that's all we need to do. That's going to determine VB Wednesday, and then we have VB Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Okay, just a moment while I put these in. Don't forget our mentorship. If you want to learn how to create these automatically and create and sell your applications, our mentorship is a great way to do that. Don't forget to visit myexcelmentor.com, myexcelmentor.com. Okay, VB Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. VB Sunday. All right, Saturday and Sunday helps me just to make sure we got Saturday, and then Sunday is the last one. So once we have a total quantity, we can start something like a do while loop, and that's going to help us understand exactly how many, so we don't go over that limit. Now, lesson quantity automatically is going to be based on that. So now that we have lesson quantity, we can do that. So we're going to focus on the lesson database, right? So we're creating lessons. So with lesson database, making sure we have the name right, lessons database. Oh, there it is, lessons. Okay, so with lessons database, we're going to work on that. So first of all, I want to know the first available row. So lesson row is equal to, actually we got lesson row, that's our variable, right? Double check our variables, less row equals, and then I want the first available variable. So the first available row is going to be the lesson row plus 1. It's going to be the first available row. So now that we have the first available row, what we want to do is I want to run a do while loop as mentioned before. So we can do that. Do while lesson number, we're going to increment this number, is less than or equal to the lesson quantity. We're going to keep doing this, and we'll run another check too. So that's the loop I want to run. But what I want to do is I want to run a loop from all the days, from let's say 22 through 28. I want to loop through all the days. So we can do that. We have something called the day row to do that. We've created it. So inside this do while loop, for day row is equal to 22 to 28. Don't forget to close our loop, next day row. So inside that loop, we're simply going to be check if, again, classes dot range, what is it going to be? B and the day row dot value does not equal empty if there's a date in that, right? Remember, we're checking, is there a date here or not? Monday, Tuesday, no. Wednesday, yes. If there's a date, then I want to create a class for that date as long as we're under the quantity. So then, assuming if it's not equal, then what we're going to do is dot range A, dot range being our lesson database, and in this case, the lesson row dot value. Okay, then we can actually, let's do this. We need a loop because we need to do, so this is going to be, there we go. Now we're going to make sure we got end if here. Let's put an end if. Okay, now A is going to be, of course, that lesson ID. So what is that lesson ID is located? It's located directly inside B17, right? Where's that next lesson ID? Right here. Right here, B17, lesson ID is here. So we've got that track, so we just need to add that lesson ID in here. Equals classes dot range B17. We'll put that down as dot value because our lesson ID. Okay, so now that we have our lesson ID, what else do I want to put in? I want to put in the actual date, right? The next thing that we're going to be putting in inside Enroll is that, actually, let's take a look here inside our lessons database here, is that date. So what is the date? So it's going to be whatever is located here inside B and the day row. So we can write that up right now. So dot range B, we could just copy that. Actually, we're going to copy all of that here and then just make the updates a little bit easier. Make the updates. That's going to be focused on column B. And then, of course, that's going to be our lesson date. And what is our lesson date? It's going to come directly from B and the day row. B and the day row. Okay, that's a little bit easier. So that covers B. All right, so now we're ready. So now we can use our data mapping. Notice we've covered the first two columns here and here. Now we can use the data mapping. We can run a loop for the day column so we can add in the class ID, the start time, the duration, all this from 3 to 8. So we're using a combination here for data mapping. So we can use a loop for the lesson column is equal to 3 to 8. And then next lesson column. Okay, so what we want to do here is simple. So dot cells, we're already inside the lesson database. So dot cells, we're already in the lesson database. We have our lesson row. Now we have our lesson column. Dot value is going to be equal to classes dot range. What is the range? The range, where's that located? That's located in dot cells, located in row 1 of our database. And then it's going to be based on the column. So lesson column dot value. So basically it's going to take whatever's in the classes and place it directly in the database. So we're going to call this add in class data. Okay, that's it. That's all we have to do. And then lastly, what I do want to add is the row. I want to know that row. That's going to help us probably later on. So let's add in that row. It's going to be in column K. So we can do that last. That's not without data mapping. So we can do that just simply copying this, and then we'll update here, copying this here, putting it down here, changing this to K, and then of course we're going to be based on the lesson row equals the lesson row. Okay, that's going to add in the row number. Now remember, if you're not deleting, you can use a formula in that. But if you're going to be deleting rows, we can of course use a formula, but we're not because of share and sync, so we're adding in the actual static row here. Okay, good. So now that we have that in K, now what we want to do is we want to increment the lesson numbers, right? We're adding the lesson numbers, we're keeping them up, so we want to increment those. I want to count all the lesson numbers. So the lesson lesson number equals the lesson number plus 1, because we need to hit a limit. So if the lesson number is greater than or equal to the lesson quantity, which is the total number, then exit do. Okay, because we don't want to exceed that lesson quantity. Okay, also I want to increase the lesson row. Remember, we're adding lesson rows in here, so I want to make sure that we're adding them. So the lesson row is equal to the lesson row plus 1. Okay, very good. So that's going to cover that. And now the reason is we added our original lesson row here, but it's not inside the loop. So we need to increment our lesson rows. We're creating new ones, so we just need to add in that. Okay, and if the next day row, that looks good, and the loop, right? So what do we want after that? Once we finish out that loop, what else do I need to do? But after the day, notice after the next day, after we continue this particular loop here, we go through all the days of the week. Remember, we talked about that. It's back in here. After we go through all of these, what I need to do is I need to add 7 to this date, B21, so we can go for the next week. Once I add 7, it'll update all the dates here. So let's do that right now. Let's update that and make sure that we don't turn calculations off, because we need those calculations on. We can turn off screen updating, but we need that. So in this case, classes dot range B21 dot value is going to be equal to, again, whatever the current value is plus 7. So all we need to do is just copy this, paste it in there, and add 7 plus 7. Okay, so that's going to increment that. We'll just increment one week, because that's exactly what I want, 1 week. So that's going to update all of the dates inside that as we loop through that, depending upon how many weeks are in. Okay, good. That looks really good. We're going to make it a little bit faster with application screen updating, probably a little bit, but that's good enough for now. So let's finish that out. We're going to probably do a little bit more, but I think we're good. I'm going to save that as far as this macro is concerned, and then we'll take a look. So when do I want to run this macro? I want to run this macro only when we create a brand new class, right? When we save that class, that's when I want to create it. So only on new classes, right? So here is our class save. Let's go up to here. Class save is the first macro all the way. Wow, we got a lot of macros in this. Class save here, right? So notice here, if B7 is empty, let's put in new class, existing class. So again, create class lessons. We already have it here under that. So perfect. So let's just paste that in. I want to make sure it's right. So run macro to create lessons. And also here's our macro to update lessons. Notice it's here. So we've got that already. All I need to do is just run this macro. So let's save this. And then what we'll do is we can add that in. So let's create a brand new class. Actually, we don't need to in this case because we don't have any classes that are created. So we should probably just run the macro. Let's go click on the lesson database, and then we'll go ahead and run the macro, see if there's any issues on that. Scrolling all the way down here, for our create lessons, that's a macro we just created. I'm going to scroll down here, take a quick look at this, see if there's any issues. And okay, good. It looks like it created 6:30, 7:2. Nice. Okay, that was pretty quick. It looked really good. Everything else is here. We've got the lessons. All right, so now what I want to do is, this one's a little bit more trickier. Let's say, again, I want to update this. What if I want to update? Now, if I update the start time or the duration or the teacher, pretty easy, not difficult. What if I update the days of the week, right? Or what if I update the from date or to date? I need to then make some changes accordingly on that. So it's a little bit trickier. That's one called class update the lessons. That's the macro we're going to work on now, because that's the one we want to do. So they're going to take parts of the current macro and update lessons. That's the one I want to do. We're going to use pretty much the same variables as we did. So we can just pretty much, let's just copy the first one up here. I'm going to copy this and then just go down here because we're going to use a lot of the same. So we need that. But the first thing what I want to do is I want to update. I want to clear out some information. We're going to focus on the with lessons database. We're going to run an advanced filter on that. And that filter, first thing I want to do is clear out any results that might previously be here, because I want to look at all the lessons that were created. So from here, AA all the way through, let's say AG. Well, let's add in one more. I think I'm going to need that row. So I'm going to put in the row here. Let's just bring this over. Let's add one more all the way to AH. I want to bring in that row too. That's important, very important, because I need to know the original row. So AA3 all the way through AH, we're going to clear any previous results. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Dot range AA3 all the way through AH and then a large row, dot clear contents, okay, dot clear contents. Okay, it's going to clear out any previous values. Again, I want to determine the last row of this because we're going to run an advanced filter, so it's going to be last row based on A, which is fine. And now if the last row is less than 4, we can exit the sub. If the last row is less than 4, then exit the sub. It's going to create an error if we try to run this without any data. So assuming that we have data, we're going to ready to run our advanced filter again. So I'm just going to use my specific auto hotkey to help create that. And of course, now we can just update that range. So taking a look inside here, we can update. This is going to be based on 3, and I want to run that. Again, let's take a quick look at this. Very, very important. We have a blank here, so we need to make sure to include the blank here. I need to run this all the way from A3 to L3, including that blank when you want to run it. The reason why are we doing a blank? Because I want to bring inside here, I want to bring it all in here. We have the attended here. That's a calculator. We're going to bring in formulas. I'll be adding that formulas later on from a different database. So eventually what we're going to do is going to create a formula right here. I'll put the formula up here. Then I'm going to bring that formula down. It's going to bring in all those that attended, the number attended. Then when I bring in the data, but we have to wait for our database. The scheduling will handle who's attended and who's not. So we'll be able to count that based on a different database. So we'll add in that formula later. I'm going to color that yellow. It's going to let us know that we're adding a formula in here. That's going to keep in mind. Okay, so these are our results. And we're going to bring that in. Okay, so we're going to bring it, we want to bring it all the way in from AHA. So the first thing is to run that advanced filter based all the way to column L. So let's update that to column L. Where's our criteria? Our criteria is coming directly from here, R2 through S3. Remember, I'm not concerned with old or anything that's before that. The current date, we're not going to change. We don't want to make any changes to previous classes, only future classes. So that's critical. Okay, to do that, we need to go in here. So let's continue on with this macro. L, our criteria is located again, R2 through S3. So I'm going to change R2 through S3. Our results are going to come directly in AA2 all the way through AH. So AA, and then we'll change this to AH. Okay, again, I want the last results row. We have that defined here. Let's make sure we don't have it. So let's add in that. We're going to need the results row. We're going to need to loop through the results row. So let's add in some information on here because we're going to need that. So, okay, I think we have those actually up here. Let's just check last results row. And then result, we should put result row. We'll probably use that result row. We'll need to loop through that. So as long, we don't have that there, but we do have the last results row. I think we don't have that. Okay, so we have last results row. I'm going to use this here. I'm going to copy this, come down to our where we are in our credit and continue on with that. So our last results row is going to be based on, of course, our class ID AA. So we can use equals and then AA, this time AA. We want to check to make sure we have data. So if our last results row is less than 3, then exit the sub, then exit sub. That means, of course, there's no lessons there, nothing else we can do. Want to make sure that we actually have data in there. Okay, assuming that we do have data, we can then move on. Now, remember, early on in this training, we're making differentiations. I want to know, this is very important, what kind of change was made? General throw. Was it a change to one of the date fields, from date, to date, or one of the dates? That's very important. Or was it a change to one of the, perhaps the teacher or perhaps the room? Remember, let's just take a quick review of that because that's very important. And inside the classes here, we take a look at that. Inside, we made differentiations between that. So let's take a look. That's based on worksheet change. So we have to know. On term, let's take a look right in here. This is what I want to focus on. Change of schedule, date, time, room. So this is if anything changes, we're making a change automatically to B15. B15 is going to set true. So if B15 is true, but if B16 is true, that means there's a change to the date, change to day or date based on B16. So I need to know that. If B16 is true, then we need to make a change to, if B16 is false, then in this case, it's okay. We can just make a much easier update. So let's take a look at that. I want to differentiate between B16 being false or true inside our macro. So that's just going to put a note here. Check for day or date change. If, and then we're going to focus on classes, dot range, B16 dot value equals false, then no date change. Else, and if. Okay, this is going to be a day or date change. Okay, so this is going to be a lot larger macro. This is going to be far simpler, right? So if there's no date, all we need to do is just simply update based on that. So all we're going to need to do in this case, once we run this macro, it's going to look to the row, go loop through all the rows, look for the row, and then determine the original row, which could be here, make a change to the start time, duration, or teacher, or location, or whatever it is that we've changed. So we just need to run a little loop and check for a change on that. Relatively easy. So the first thing we're going to do is just put no date change. Let's just put an update here. Let's say maybe it's going to be check for teacher, time, duration, or room change. That's all we're focused on here. No day or date change. Much easier. For the result row, result row, make sure we have that inside a variable up here. Result row right here. That's what I want. Okay, for the result row equal to 3 to last result row. Close our loop. Next result row. First thing I want to do, I want to get that lesson row. The lesson row is, where's that located? Is equal to, again, dot range. It's going to be based on AH. AH. That's why that lesson row is so important to bring in. And the result row. Dot value. Let's bring this up here, and we notice that we're going to focus here. Our lesson row is going to appear right here. H, that's going to tell us the original row of data. This is going to be brought over, going to be brought into here. So for example, let's just copy this information here before we run the macro so we get an idea. Oh, we don't need to copy it all. So we're going to bring the row. We don't need to bring it over. It's different. So bring the row here. I want to check AH, making sure that we got a value there, and then we know the original row of the data. So lesson row is going to be AH. So now we can just run a loop. So but in this case, let's take a look at this loop. In this case, right, the class ID will never change, right? So the start time, the duration, teacher ID. So the only ones that are going to change are anywhere from 4 to 8. That's the only ones that are going to change. Class ID 1. So we don't need to worry about column 3. So we can run a loop. For lesson column equals 4 to 8. Next lesson. Okay, so let's just run a check. So, but I don't want to just update it automatically. I only want to update it if it's different. So if dot cells lesson row lesson column dot value does not equal, where is it going to be based on? Based on what is the classes dot range. Where's that range located? In row 1. So dot cells row 1 lesson column dot value. Okay, so if it doesn't equal, only then are we going to update it. If so, then copy that, then paste it in, then equals, right? So I need to change that. So only we're going to update it if it's a different value. Otherwise, we don't need to make the update. Okay, so again, if we're only going to I'm only going to change that start time if in H13 it's different, right? If this is different than what is located in H13 here in the start time, then we're going to update it. So if I change that time, only then do we need to update it. Okay, so that's all we need to do for that. That's in loop through the next result row. Just continue on that loop. All we need to do. So it's very, very easy for that specific change. So, but what if they make a day or date change? That's a little bit more complex. So let's go through that. Okay, this is the point where I need to define the day or date. So let's copy this here because that's very important. I think we can use this. I'm going to copy this and just get rid of it here. We don't need it here, but I do need it down here. So here I need the start date. Here I need the end date. Here I need B21. I need it all updated here. So that's very, very important here. Now what we can do is we can basically just copy this, the one that we did here, if M11. So I'm going to start out right down here. I'm going to copy this here because we did it, and then I'm going to make the updates accordingly because it's almost the same. So I'm going to loop, copy that entire loop and make those updates, but it's going to be, we're going to have to make some changes on that. Okay, so let's take a look. Else, now let's bring it out so we have a nice clear code. So we're going to bring it all the way, tab, all the way out here. So again, we have our if there's changes to only teacher time duration, otherwise date change, and then we have our end if down here and end with the cloud. We're focused on the database of the lessons. Okay, so now we can make some changes here. So let's clean it up a little bit here, bringing everything in here so we know what, so we have class start date, of course, our end date. Our classes is going to be basically set the base date. We're going to have all the lesson quantities. That's not going to change because we do need to determine the lesson quantity. But now we need to make a few small updates. Okay, we don't need with lesson database here because we've already set it up here. So we don't need it again. So we can remove this with and make sure we remove the corresponding end with, which we're not going to need. Make sure that it's not here. Okay, good. It's not here. We only have one single end with. That's critical. Okay, so once we get that, what I want to do is I want to loop. In this case, we're going to loop through the results. I want to loop through all this. So we're going to start out, our result row is going to start out at 3 because we're going to loop through all the current classes. Basically, we're going to remove it. So result, set that up, result row is going to be equal to 3. And then we don't need this, the lesson row. And then we do need this, but I want to make sure if, as we loop through these, if this is empty, right, there's no row here, then what I want to do is create a brand new row inside our database. So there's no existing row, so I'm going to create a new row. So first thing we want to do is check to see if why would it be empty? Because if we've deleted them or it's gone down as we increment more and more, it may be beyond it. So for example, why would that happen? Well, let's say the change that we make, let's say we decided to add a day, right? We run through all the loops. We're not going to make any changes, but we're adding a day. So we're actually adding more lessons than are currently there. This might be blank. As we go through the existing ones, we may be adding new. So let's go ahead and update that in case it is. So I'm going to run if dot range AH and the result, starting at 3, and the result row dot value equals empty. If it equals empty, then our lesson row is going to be here. Otherwise, what? Otherwise, our lesson row is going to be located in AH. So we can write that in here. Else and if. Okay, so our lesson row is going to be, otherwise it's going to be exactly what's located right here. Our lesson row is going to be what's in AH. So we got to have a lesson row equal to whatever's in AH. So just add the equal. That's going to set, so our lesson row, existing lesson row, or new lesson row. Let's just call this new lesson row, new lesson. All right, so we've got both of those set up. So we've got that and if. Now what we can do is we can add in our for-day. Our do while should be up here. So as we add in our do while, we're going to do that. We're starting off. So our do while is going to go up here because I want to do all of this while the lesson quantity is. Right? So we have our initial result row here. We're going to set our do row, and then we're going to do this always as we go through. But this time we're not looping through the result row. We're simply adding one. We're going to increment one. It's almost the same, but it helps because I want to increment through the day row. Okay, so here we go. For day row equals 22 to 28. That's not going to change. If class B row is empty, then if it's not empty, we're going to be adding the date. Okay, so let's take a look. So remember, our lesson row could be existing in this case, or it could be new in this case. So what I want to do is I don't want to automatically add in the lesson ID, but I only want to add in the lesson ID if it's empty, right? So if, in this case, if this is empty, A and the value, if it's empty, then do we add in that. If $range equals empty, then we're going to add in the lesson ID only if it's empty because some of them are existing. And I want to do the same thing with B. I only wanted to do the lesson date's got to be updated to make sure. We do want to update the lesson date automatically based on that, so that's good. We're going to update the lesson. Then again, we're going to run our loop. We want to make sure that we're going to run a loop. But in this case, I don't want to update all the class data. I only want to update it if it's been changed, right? Because it's not a new one. So we need to run a check. Has it been changed or not? I'm going to copy this. And then I'm going to put if, then I'm going to paste it in, and I'm going to put then. So basically, I'm going to change this to does not equal. So basically, what I want to do is I only want to update the data if it's different. If it's not, that's going to save a lot of time. Then we could just leave it alone. No reason to update it. Okay, so K, in this case, K, do we want to update? I only want to update K if it doesn't exist. So again, simple this. If adding it at if, only want it in that row if it's like if K equals empty, then add in the lesson row. Only need to add it in because we don't know if it's existing or not. So then we're going to increment the lesson row by 1. Okay, same thing if the lesson number is greater than or equal to lesson quantity, or the lesson row, we're going to increment the lesson row, but I also need to increment the result row. Remember, our result row is starting here on 3, but we need to increment that. Oh, sorry, here, our result row, and this side, result row. So what we want to make sure that we're going to increment that again. So the result row is simply going to equal to, as we move down here, as we go right after, before our loop here, we're incrementing that, but right here, each time result row equals result row plus 1. Increment result row, right? Because we need to go continue down here even when they're blank, adding new ones. If it's blank, we'll be adding a new one. If it's existing, we'll be making the updates if changes have been made. So that's going to update those lessons. Okay, so continuing on. Okay, so once we've completed that loop, we've added new ones, but what if we have lessons that are still, let's say we're using less lessons. Let's say we loop through all the lessons, but it's a lot less, and we still have a lot more that need to be cleared out. Why would that happen? Well, let's say we had 3 days a week, but we decide to change it to 2 days a week. What I need to do is I need to clear out all the remaining lessons. But again, because we're using share and sync, I don't want to clear out the lesson ID, but I want to clear out all the data that's associated with this. So we can loop through that and double check. So we can do all the way. So let's put a little bit of note in here. Clear out remaining rows, if any. So again, so we can do that. So let's go, I think we added a clear row in here. So I want to make sure that we put the dimensions here. Clear row, good. So that's the row that we're going to be clearing out. Clear row is going to be equal to the result, right? We're continuing the result row where we left off, result row. Or actually, we don't need to, we can just check to make sure that it's actually, first I want to check if the last result row is greater than the result row, then only then are we going to continue on, right? So there we go. If the last row is greater than the result row, then, okay, so then we're going to, only then do we run this loop, right? Only then, because, why is that? Because we noticed our result row, let's say our result row ended right here, but we still have a lot more days to clear out. So that's going to happen if we remove days from the current class schedule. So we want to update that. So then for result row equals result row to last result row. I want to go to last result, next clear row, closing that loop. Okay, so once we have that, so I simply want to run our loop. So the lesson row is going to be equal to whatever's in AH dot range, AH, and the clear row, That's going to be our lesson row, lesson database row. So once we have that, we can just run our loop. So in this case, basically, I want to clear out everything from 2 all the way to, what is this? 12. So 11, sorry. Okay, so I want to clear out everything from 2 to 11. So let's write that loop right now. Okay, for, in this case, lesson column equals 2 to 12. And why do we have to loop these? Because we're using share and sync. We can only change one cell at a time, because I want to make sure that we update it for every single user. That's called share and sync. So again, close our loop, next lesson column. And the way to do this is just simply inside our lesson database. If, again, I want to make sure if it's not blank. If it's blank, there's nothing to do. If dot cells lesson row, comma, lesson column dot value does not equal empty, then we're going to clear it out. Then, again, all we need to do is just copy that and use clear contents. Copy that, then clear contents. Clearing out the data in there. Okay, so we've got that. That'll cover it. That's going to clear out any remaining in case we're using actually less lessons than the original time saved. So next lesson, closing out, making sure we have next clear row using our for clear row, and then last result row and if. Okay, so everything looks nice and clean. Okay, the last thing what I want to do is I want to set B15 and B16 to false. What do I mean by that? I want to make sure we've just changed the updates. We've fixed everything. So I want to make sure B15 and B16 are set to false inside the B8. So all we need to do, that's with the classes. That's going to be regardless. So classes dot range B15 B16 dot value equals false. Let's call it set class changes to false. Perfect. That's what I want. Saving our work. Let's go ahead and set these to false, and then double check some changes to make sure that the changes we make are set. I'm going to say, let's say go ahead and click on Tuesday, or actually Tuesday here, and Wednesday. So these go to true, which is good. I'm going to save our work. And now I'm going to click update and see if there's any changes in here. Last result row, I think that's results, just to make sure. I think it's results. I'll update that. Last results, I always mess that up. I got to keep consistent with that. Okay, so all we need to do is I'm just gonna use find and replace, because I don't know how many places I've used that. And then I'm gonna replace inside our current module, copy that, and then replace it. And then I'm just gonna add that S in here to make sure that every instance that I put results, replace all. Okay, 3 of them. Okay, let's continue on with that macro. Okay, take a look at that. It ran okay. And now we've got more lessons. Okay, perfect. Let's take a look at that inside the database here. Okay, so we have our original data. So it was like 12, 14, right? Notice we have that just a few days here inside that. And then now we have more. And so now we have 12, 13. So now previously, now we have 9. Previously we had, let's take a look at 7. So it added 2 more days, which is what I want. Now let's remove a few days and see what else. So now I want to say, let's say only on Mondays and Wednesdays. Okay, so now they're both set to true. Click update on that and take a look. Now we should have some cleared out information on the database. Exactly. So all we did is we have cleared out data. Now we only have these. So the last thing before I let you go, I want to bring this data over and I want to bring it directly into it so that we have those scheduled inside our tab. That's very, very simple with just the last macro. All right, so it's going to be called load lessons. I don't think we have a macro on that. So again, let's take a look inside here. We're going to call this load lessons. We can put it up here right above there. Sub class load lessons. And we're going to load them all in there. The first thing what I want to do is I want to make sure that we've cleared out, again, any results. I want to make sure that we, just like we did here, I want to clear out with the lessons database. So I'm going to clear that out here. Same thing here. Load lesson, and of course end with. I want to clear out any results that we might have had. I want to load all those lessons. So again, I love the last row, just as we did here inside the database. We need to get the last row. We can copy this because we've done that, and also our advanced filters, pretty much the same, and this, so we can copy that out. We don't need to check for the date change, but I do want to use all of this here, so we can copy that here and bring it right up, make it a lot easier on us. So pasting it, the last row, and then the last, everything's going to be the same. The criteria is going to be the same because I want to load all of that up. So based on that, also, we're going to use this. I'm going to clear this out. We're going to load that, but we'll clear this out, this specific on when we load the class, we'll clear all this information out. We'll add that. So clearing it 09 all the way through V and all the way down. In fact, we should probably add a lot more to that. Why don't we do that? Bring this down here. We need a lot more lessons all the way down here. We're using it. Okay, that's good enough for now. So I'm going to clear that out all the way from 09 all the way through V in the last row. So let's go back into the code and make sure that we have all that on there on class load. Every time it loads, I want to make sure we clear that out. So we're going to load it up here. Here, this is the one I want to focus on. Clearing that. Again, let's add on to that. So again, starting in 09 all the way through V, and then let's say a large row. That's all. I just want to make sure that we're clearing all the lessons out we had starting here on 09 all the way to V. Okay, so now that we have that, we're making sure that on class load is, now we can load in the information. We know it's already been cleared out. So continuing on with our load lessons. So we've got the last results row. We know it's lesson 3. So what I want to do is I want to sort them. I also want to know, to make sure that we're sorting them. It's kind of a nice lesson. So we've already done sort. So again, all we need to do is just copy that and paste it in. So we can just scroll down looking for our last sort. I believe we have a sort lessons up here. So we can copy this here. We sort and then make the changes. It makes it a lot faster. So class load, we're looking for the lesson load. Right here, we can just paste that in. So sort field's clear. We're going to add. So based on our lessons database, I want to sort it based on the date. So based on this date located in AB3, and that's what we're going to sort all the way from AB because I want that date. I want it sorted by date. So AB3 is where we're going to have that specific key, and then also we're going to sort on which is the results. So in this case, we want to make sure that our last results row, making sure that variable is correct. AA3, we're going to be sorting everything all the way to AH in the last result. So that's easy. Now we've got to sort it. So now all we need to do is add in the information into the classes. So once we've sorted that, and of course we're going to have it on ascending, which is correct. It's fine. That's the way I want it. Classes dot range 09 all the way through. Let's see, what are we going through? Also, all we really want to do is bring in the notes. I'm not going to bring in, so we're going to go through AG here, and all we want to do is go right in here to T. So really T, we can probably merge instead of these. So we're just going to come into T, and that's it. That's enough. So A09 through T, and again, we start on row 9. We're starting on, and the last results row plus, right, we're starting on 9, we're coming from 3, so we need to add 6 plus 6 dot value is equal to, in this case, dot range B3, starting at, we don't want AA because AA3 is our data, so we don't need that, all the way through AG in the last results row and the last results row. Okay, that's going to bring in the value. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So inside our enrolled students database, our lesson database, we don't need the row, so we're coming all the way. All we need is the lesson date through the notes, bringing everything else in. And I want to make sure that when we add this macro, load lessons, we need to add this to our specific macro where we load here. Load student list, I want to load it to the entire class load. This is the one I want to. We're loading the student list. Now I'm going to paste it down here. Load lesson list. So when we load it, automatically it loads in. Okay, let's take a look at that, check for issues. Double click here. So this is the one we're going to focus on here. Loading that in. Again, last results row, messed that up all the time. Continuing on. Okay, nice. Now we just need to update. Let's go ahead and update the formats. Everything looks good. So I'm going to go all the way down here. I'm going to load. This is going to be the start time. So I'm going to hold the shift down, go into this. I'm going to focus on more number formats and add the time. In this particular time, we'll go with this. And then on the duration, slightly different on this. I'm going to go down here. Again, home, general, and then for more number formats, I'm going to be focused on time, but I'm going to use this one here. Okay, that looks really, really good. It's been an incredible marathon training. We're going to finish up classes. We got a few small items. Next week, we're going to start focusing on the schedule. You cannot miss next week. Scheduling is going to be amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. If you do like these trainings, don't forget to subscribe, click on the notification icon bell, and I'd really appreciate it if you could pick up the 175 workbook zip file package. That's got 175 of my best workbooks in there. It's only $66. That's just 37 cents per template. Go ahead and grab that. Thanks so much for appreciating sticking with us till the end. We'll see you next week.